What's going on, guys? TG or Thundergod here with the part 2 to my power rankings mini series. Ton of support on the first video. Thank you guys for that. Where we scale the top 10 characters based on what we know at the time. This including data books, guidebooks, or fan books. For anybody who missed part 1, this essentially means that even if there is a statement in data book 3 that's dropped for a character, it has to be in reference to the character during that specific arc, otherwise it can't be used. Now, before we actually get into the power rankings, we have to look at our previous top 10 real quick. That was Minato, Sakumo, Itachi, Hiruzen, and the Sannin, Edo Hashirama, Edo Tobirama, Kakashi, and Kabuto, Might Guy, Kisame, and Haku. Now, a lot of characters are going to have to get cut off going into Shippuden due to a lot of characters not having concrete scaling chains. And I'm not gonna lie, these characters wouldn't have really made it that far into Shippuden regardless, so it's not too crazy. The characters getting cut from the list are Haku, Kabuto, Edo Tobirama, Edo Hashirama, Sakumo, and Hiruzen. For the Jonin tier fighters, the main differences come from Kakashi from part 1 to part 2, which I will touch on when we get to Kakashi. For the Edo Tensei variants, scaling to a potentially mentally restricted Hiruzen is just far too difficult to use, especially later on. Hiruzen himself could remain, but realistically, he shares a spot with the Sannin, so I just don't see a reason to keep mentioning him. And maybe unlike some other dead characters, Hiruzen doesn't get more statements or more scaling pushing him up. It just bounces off the Sannin, so there's no real reason to keep him on here. But if I just put him next to the Sannin, that's pretty much it. And then we also have Sakumo, whose statement and data book entry were the only pieces of info for him, and it was already kind of an arbitrary placement to begin with, so he's not really making it into Shippuden either. All right, enough of the yap. Let's just get into the top 10. Starting off, we have the Kazekage Rescue arc, which ranges from chapters 245 to 281. At the number 10 slot, we have Kabuto. Now, Kabuto really exists on this top 10 at least to just establish a bit of a baseline for us. He just represents that part 1 Kakashi level, possibly in reference to Kakashi as a whole or the Rusty version at the beginning of part 1. He's just kind of here as a benchmark. I don't want to spend too much time on him to not detract from the other characters, and to be honest, Kabuto's placement isn't really that relevant past this arc. Like most characters just share similar feats or lore or just kind of scaling to Kabuto at this point, so he isn't really that important to the overall list. At the number 9 slot, we have Naruto and Sakura. I have Sakura in front of Naruto, but let's talk about Naruto first. Naruto's outright noted to be stronger from his data book 3 growth chart, with him even believing he might be stronger than Iruka. I do it every video. With him believing he may be stronger than Iruka at this point, to which Iruka tells him not to push it. This may indicate that Iruka caps himself at Chunin exams Naruto level, since that's the last he's seen of Naruto, but not that important. Naruto's time skip training leaves him a bit to be desired, as he isn't really that crazy during the Kazekage Rescue. His main asset at this point is him being able to tap into his QB power a bit more consistently compared to before, utilizing it to use jutsu such as the Odama Rasengan, which did in fact one-shot 30% of Itachi's chakra. The main issue with Naruto is that you don't have the greatest showings from him, like base Kakashi outright intercepting a bloodlust in Naruto's charge with the artistic duo, or Sakura being able to keep up with QB Naruto and travel speed, same with Kakashi. His performance against Deidara doesn't help that much either, although Deidara does know his punches do have quite a bit of impact, so Naruto is a bit of a bruiser. The way I look at Naruto is that he's strong enough to where he's able to perform combinations with Kakashi, and he's noted to be on Kakashi's team, not as sensei and students, but as equals, fellow Konoha-shinobi. The combination of Naruto and Sakura also could stall out Kakashi during the bell test until nighttime, and assuming that Kakashi's taking a more active role in fighting them this time, which is noted as he's using a Sharingan, this is a bit of an impressive feat. He should still be above the duo, as Sakura notes his side weaving speed is so fast you can't keep up. Kakashi does note that they are a formidable team, and for Naruto to really be useful as backup against Itachi Uchiha of all people, I think does speak volumes to his strength. The way I look at it, Naruto's just useful or can fight against people Kakashi himself is kind of fighting seriously now. Right above Naruto, but in the same ranking, obviously, I have Sakura. Sakura shares a spot since neither her and Naruto really outdo Kakashi or seem to outdo the other, even though this entire fight is off screen. Her performance in the Sasori fight is very telling, and I think it does kind of put her above Naruto, especially when looking at the statements that Sasori himself makes about Sakura compared to Deidara with one arm and low clay or no clay, just shitting on Naruto. Sakura at this point has ridiculous strength, smashing the Hiruko puppet entirely, which was actually upgraded by Sasori to be more defensive, along with being able to blow away iron sand prisms. All this coupled with pretty advanced display of medical ninjutsu, Sakura was gradually adapting to Sasori's offensive pattern after being used as a puppet by Chiyo for some duration of the fight, this mainly being based on using Sasori's finger movements to almost precog where the puppet will go instead of just outright reacting to the puppet's attacks. I will note this also wouldn't extend to jutsu since Sakura can't dodge attacks like Iron Sand, World Order, which instantly tags her multiple times, so this only really extends to the third Kazekage puppet. Sasori noting that he'll have to waste more chakra lest he wants a prolonged bout, which Chiyo remarking she isn't really needed at a certain point in the fight, is really telling of Sakura's prowess at this point. Although I'll touch on Chiyo a bit more when we talk about her, as this isn't a one-to-one. I will also say it should be obvious, without the antidote, Sakura would have never been able to do nearly as well in the fight against Sasori. This, coupled with Sakura progressively getting mental amp during the fight and having a noticeable improvement via thinking about Sasuke after it's revealed Sasori was involved with Orochimaru, this being stated in the data book, kind of puts it to where a lot of Sakura's feats are good, but they kind of exist in a vacuum and only really exist in the context of this fight. I do think Sakura is strong and very impressive, and most people wouldn't be able to do what she did against Sasori, but you also do want to note that there are certain factors that allowed her to do that well. At the number 8 slot, we have Granny Chiyo. Now, this may seem kind of low, but I think it'll make more sense once you look at the rest of this top 10. She's very weird to discuss due to her fight against Sasori. The problem with Chiyo is that she had quite extensive knowledge on Sasori and his puppets. She, however, did not anticipate or factor in things like the Hiroko puppet's improved defense as her new left arm, causing Chiyo to outright concede she can't deal with the Hiroko puppet on her own. The trade-off here is that Chiyo at the same time can anticipate Sasori's moves via understanding the puppet master's style, which allows Chiyo to maneuver Sakura and herself out of the way from any damage. Chiyo can also just react to Sasori's third Kazekage puppet attacks, which Sasori notes really just make it useless to try and attack her, which leads her to directly counter Chiyo by launching gas and tying Sakura up with a kunai rope combo. Chiyo can clash evenly with the father and mother puppet, causing Sasori to utilize the third's jutsu, the Iron Sand, where we further see that Chiyo can react and block Iron Sand attacks, which are consistently faster than the third Kazekage puppet himself. This does, however, cripple the puppets one by one and eventually even one of Chiyo's arms due to the magnetic power of the third, Chiyo only gaining function in the arm later on due to the third being destroyed. So while she is strong and does have comparable feats to Sasori, you also can't ignore the fact that she would never have made it that far in the fight if she had just gone in by herself, which leads to Chiyo's placement being very weird. It's almost a similar case to Sakura, where she's almost specifically designed to counter this opponent. She obviously has further showings like her secret white move, Chikamatsu's 10 puppets, which, fun fact, is one of the very few S-rank jutsu that's noted in Data Book 3, so this is a very impressive technique. This technique does enable Granny Chiyo and Sakura to really survive against Sasori's more latent abilities that I'm going to touch on when Sasori kind of comes about. But the bottom line I really have with Chiyo is that her or Sakura would never have been able to really beat Sasori on their own, which makes their feats against him really weird to discuss, because it's kind of like, yeah, they have good showings, but how would they have gotten to this point originally if they didn't have each other to kind of work off of? Like, even the 10 puppets would have never really made their debut against Sasori, since Granny Chiyo had gotten her arm kind of paralyzed via the Iron Sand, and she wasn't able to use all 10 fingers to manipulate the 10 puppets. So I think Chiyo's placement here is pretty fair. I think it'll make also a lot more sense once you get into the other characters who are above her, as there's more solid reasonings for why they're that high up. At the number 7 slot, we have Might Guy and Kakashi. I actually have Might Guy over Kakashi personally, but they share the number 7 slot. Kakashi's placement here shouldn't be too much of a surprise, considering he was the peak of Konoha Part 1 and literally the benchmark that everybody was kind of measured against. His basis for being above Naruto and Sakura is pretty clear. I think the only questionable thing about Kakashi is if he actually got physically stronger from Part 1 to Part 2, since his data book stats remain the exact same. And I'm not saying data book stats are some objective thing that can be measured against another character, but more so to compare how a character improves against themselves. It's like a measure of how they are as a person and where their strong points are. This, coupled with the fact that Kakashi somewhat implies he came up with Kamui or is referencing an amazing jutsu at the beginning of Shippuden, so it's a little weird. I will say, looking at the feats, Kakashi performs very well against 30% of Itachi's chakra, baiting out Genjutsu via shadow clones and setting up Itachi to eat an Odama Rasengan. We see that he's much more knowledgeable about Itachi and outright ask guy for how he combated the Sharingan, so it's like Kakashi can just fight without looking at Itachi's eyes now as well. Kakashi's also noted to be a much larger threat than Naruto, being the main reason that Deidara brings up Sasori being stronger than him in order to separate Naruto and Kakashi from himself, which almost works as Naruto's like, I'm gonna fight this guy on my own. This is also referenced later on with Deidara noting noting that Kakashi is the issue, not the Jinchuriki. However, this is Deidara factoring in Kamui, which is what tore off his other arm. Also noting that Kamui is an Itachi level ocular jutsu. Now, despite Kakashi's lack of finesse, Kamui is very impressive at this point. He's able to tear off Deidara's arm, sending it into a sealed dimension as the data book notes, with him missing the second attempt on Deidara, who can somewhat shrug off or physically resist being sent away. I will also note that Deidara was moving in a linear fashion for Kakashi, which is something that maybe I'll bring up later on for some of Kakashi's Kamui feats, but Kamui should also put Kakashi in a similar tier to Guy, as when he teleports away the explosion Deidara caused by eating his clay bird, which is revealed by the very end of the arc to be a clone. Guy remarks that Kakashi is a worthy rival, lending credence to the idea that Guy thinks Kamui is what rivals his later abilities, or makes Kakashi rival him, specifically his 6th gate showing. I think the idea of Kakashi really unlocking Kamui close to the beginning of Shippuden, and why he improved so much during it, is kind of supplemented in the data book, since it notes this rare power has speeded up Kakashi's evolution as a shinobi a notch, which is why he continuously improves, as we'll see later on. At the number 7 slot sharing this, we have Might Guy. Might Guy needs very little introduction to most people, as he's far more impressive post time skip. We have all around good statements for guys, such as Zetsu noting Guy is highly skilled, with Itachi supplementing this with the exact same statement, and for him to be not underestimated, which is an insane thing to drop in a group chat when it's filled with the strongest S-class criminals in the world. Guy's praise is sung further in the dad books, which note he is more than equal to anyone in the Akatsuki, which, if you look at the members up to this point, is quite a ridiculous statement. My interpretation of this is that Guy gate amps to match the Akatsuki members in question. However, due to the lack of feats just kind of backing this, I'm not going to really throw Guy up higher. This is exemplified in his fight with 30% of Kisame's chakra, which Guy fought via the art of impersonation. In this fight, Kisame is able to capture Neji, Lee, and Tenten in water bubbles, forcing Guy into a position where he's forced to open the 6th gate, the Gate of Joy, unleashing a Sakujaku on Kisame. This creates a situation where we could run with this statement or just take the more consistent interpretation, which in my opinion is that Guy gate amps to fight each member, but we haven't seen higher gates, which are probably what are needed to actually beat somebody of Kisame or Itachi's caliber at this point. This, coupled with the Kamui metric, makes Guy's placement here pretty solid, along with the fact that he did just win his 1v1 against Kisame compared to Kakashi, who needed support. It's not a 1-to-1, obviously, since Kakashi did fight the stronger Akatsuki member, but I still do want to note that he won without really any outside support. At the number 6 slot, we have Deidara and Gaara. Now, I have Deidara over Gaara, but these two are really interchangeable. A lot of these are, but these two in specific. Now, starting off with Gaara, the reason Gaara and Deidara share a spot, despite there being a winner in their fight, is due to how their fight is a little more complex than a simple 1v1. There are a few factors present. Deidara notes that during the fight and post, he outright underestimated Gaara and that he wasn't fully prepared, this being more so in reference to the amount of clay he brought with him, which has somewhat limited his options. He did prep to an extent with having some minor explosions along with a C3 Ohako and dropping it on the sand village. This is noted to not even scratch the strong defense that Gaara used to defend it, yet this defense came from the topography that was aiding Gaara during the fight. You have factors like the data books noting Gaara's foremost principles to capture assailants and not kill them, which I think could be observed in how Gaara fights, like creating a giant sandball around Deidara, not just outright crushing him. I do not think, however, this means Gaara is slowing down his sand attacks or dropping his stats, as that would be counterintuitive. I think this is more so just his approach in the fight. Gaara being forced to protect the sand village aided Deidara, taking advantage of his somewhat predictable fighting style, or his approach in Deidara's eyes. You then have factors like the desert sand being significantly slower than Gaara's actual own gourd sand or special sand, which Deidara specifically notes is lightning fast, and this is the sand that actually does tag Deidara when he's in free fall, using his clay bird to kind of break through the desert sand sphere that Gaara used around him. The way the fight is presented, it seems like Gaara does have a slight stat edge or some sort of stat edge with his gourd sand, which Deidara is noting is very fast. However, it's not to the extent to where he's outright blitzing Deidara from his position or just able to tear his arm off while Deidara is actually on his clay bird. This kind of segues us into Deidara's side of the things on the fight. Now, Deidara only really gets tagged by Gaara's sand when he's not on his clay bird in free fall, so Gaara's sand, that's noted to be lightning fast, even in reference to Deidara, is fast, but not so fast that Deidara can't react and maneuver out the way in the air. And Gaara's sand is consistently fast enough to actually just block explosions from Deidara. This being seen when Gaara can react to the C3 Ohako with all of the desert sand, or just react to Deidara's explosion point blank, which Deidara obviously utilized to his advantage. With that being said, Deidara is no slouch, creating 6 clay constructs when Gaara actually grabs his arm, and creating these constructs before the sand fully crushed his arm after it began applying pressure to actually destroy the arm. This, along with the fact that Datara's IQ enabled him to kind of force Gaara into a situation where he can set off his explosions inside the sand barrier or just fight without outright killing Gaara, pretty much make it that there's a lot of discussion to be had about this fight. Datara also has good showings against Naruto and Kakashi, just outright dodging Naruto's QB charge attempts, and strong enough as a range fighter for Kakashi feel as he has to resort to Kamui against him, which we touched on already. Even with no arms and having run a gauntlet up to this point, Datara can clash in the air with Lee, Guy, and Neji. All three of them clashing with Datara at the same point, leading to Datara making his way over to the clay bird and initiating his dud explosion, which would have taken everybody out there if not for Kakashi's Kamui at this point. The best way I could describe Datara versus Gaara is imagine they fight in a forest where Datara has much more clay, not really underestimating Gaara, and doesn't have to bring him alive, whereas Gaara doesn't have all that extra sand that he can use from the desert, along with not having the restriction or having to deal with protecting the village. It would just turn into a very different fight. So that's kind of why I have them at the same placement. I think you can make a real valid case for both of them just winning that in a separate environment. At the number 5 slot, we have the third Kazekage, stated the strongest Kazekage like 40 times. I think it's like 9 times total if you take in all media of him being stated that. Him being stated even while Gaara is the reigning Kazekage does put him at the number 5 slot. Datara and Gaara being a very close fight. Stated in the manga by the Sand Advisors, who note he is exceptionally strong even among the Kazekage. Sasori notes this. The chapter synopsis statement of Sasori unveiling the third Kazekage also makes a similar note. The third data book also notes, hailed in the village as the strongest Kazekage ever. Pretty self-explanatory on this part. His iron sand will also just most likely be superior to Gaara sand constructs, as it can be molded to any shape, pretty much giving it infinite offensive variety. I also would note that you could probably transfer over a lot of feats from the third Kazekage puppet to the third Kazekage, as the puppet built from his body is keeping what chakra remained when he was alive, almost like a battery. That's what it's compared to in the manga. So he'd either be stronger, or you could just use the third Kazekage puppet as a baseline. Maybe you think he's stronger just because he has like everything coated in unbeatable poison. But yeah, I think his placement here is pretty self-explanatory. At the number 4 slot, I have Kisame and Sasori sharing it. Now, I'm going to start with Sasori since I personally have Kisame over him based on the feeds. But let's talk about Sasori of the Red Sand. I feel like Sasori is really self-explanatory in this one, but Sasori is outright stated to be stronger than Datara. Now, the common argument is that Datara is lying so he can fight Naruto by himself and separate him and Kakashi. But my response is, why? Why is he lying here? Like, Sasori can be stronger, and his objective can also be to separate Naruto and Kakashi. They're not mutually exclusive, so I don't think he has to be inherently lying for him to fill this objective. Now, the reason I don't have like Chiyo up here, despite the fact that she can kind of be on par with Sasori to an extent, is we don't know the exact like gap or how much stronger Sasori is than Datara. So even though he's stronger, we don't have an exact measure aside from potentially the third Kazekage metric, which we also don't know how much stronger he was than Gaara. That makes it so kind of upscaling Chiyo doesn't really work. Datara also just has shown pretty good feats compared to the Hiruka puppet, being able to actually dash onto the Geto Mazo at a similar pace and outright dodge the Hiruka puppet tail strikes. So we know he probably just outright scales above that version of Sasori, with him having full knowledge on Sasori, like his core or poison in general, meaning that Datara could arbitrarily scale above the Hiruka puppet but below like full body Sasori, and we just don't know where in between. A good follow-up point that you can maybe use to describe the speed difference between Sasori and Granny Chiyo is how Sasori was able to eject his core when he's hit by that ceiling technique, and Chiyo nor Sakura were not really able to perceive that. Like, it was too, the switch was so fast they didn't see it, along with the fact that Sasori threw the fight at the very end, which the data books also supplement, with the father and mother puppets kind of halting Sasori's own movements. The manga also backs this up with Chiyo making a similar note. Sasori being above Chiyo is pretty blatant, especially with the data book statement that notes he ranks at the top of puppeteers. You take Sasori's instant paralysis poison into account, that all his weapons and sand attacks are coated in. That was just countered in the fight, you know, no big deal. And you have just a really strong character. Also want to note that Sasori almost has 4 tiers of strength. It goes the Hiruko puppet, third Kazekage, Sasori's puppet body, and then his performance of 100 puppets, one of the other few S-rank jutsu in Data Book 3, which should also be stronger than Sasori, or at least Sasori using the third Kazekage, as the puppet strings are directly connected to his nucleus, so he can move them without the use of his fingers, which makes Sasori overall faster, due to how there is, and this is noted, no time lag between the caster's will and the puppet's movements. This, along with the fact that he's stated to have destroyed an entire nation or country with this, is very impressive, especially when you consider the fact that the Sannin in Part 1 are noted to be the military equivalent of a small country. So Sasori being this strong shouldn't be a surprise to most people. Sharing the spot, we have Kisame and Shippuden, who he's just brolic, man. There's no way to slice it. Bro has been crushing that 5x5, that push-pull legs, sipping on the finest chalice of creatine. Jokes aside, Kisame's performance in Shippuden puts his part 1 counterpart to shame. We discover that Kisame holds the most chakra in the Akatsuki, which, while impressive, requires more members for us to fully gauge how impressive that really is. Something to add to this segment is that Neji notes he's never seen anybody but Naruto with this much chakra. Kisame in this arc squares off against Might Guy, who we touched on already. Now, Kisame being stronger than 5th Gate Guy is kind of insane, considering he was clashing evenly with a shadow clone of Kakashi's in part 1. And we do know physically Kisame is a monster, as he dominates all of Team Guy and proceeds to bully Guy himself into the 6th gate, changing the very landscape itself with his water-style ninjutsu. Kisame's chakra also just does survive the Asaku Jaku barrage. This basically puts full power Kisame at an entirely different level from what we've seen previously, as the 30% clone is noted to be far weaker in terms of strength and the jutsu they can utilize. There's no verifiable scaling chain to put Kisame over Sasori or Sasori over Kisame. It's just that Kisame has these higher potential clippings, and scaling to 6th Gate Guy or being at that level is great stock, especially since we don't know the exact distance between Datara and Sasori at this point, if you go under the interpretation that Sasori is stronger, which I'm under that interpretation. It's for this reason that these two just share the same spot. I personally have him above Sasori at this point, but it's kind of based on vibes to an extent, so if you swap them around, it doesn't really matter, honestly. At the number 3 slot, we have the Sannin. Very little to actually add to the Sannin on top of the mountains of evidence presented for them in part 1. Again, if you haven't seen that, go check it out. Requiring a high difficulty effort from Itachi to actually defeat or combat, although we don't know the exact specifics on this. From Itachi's interactions with Jiraiya, we can say that the Sannin are pretty close to him, with Itachi just being a bit stronger or some arbitrary amount stronger, just requiring a lot of effort to defeat them. We're going to build on the Sannin more in Shippuden, so this is just using the pre-established info, which there haven't been the feeds or statements to necessarily put characters like Kisame or Sasori just on that level. At the number 2 slot, we have Itachi Uchiha. A lot of the same reasonings that I provided in part 1. We see 30% of Itachi's chakra take on Team Kakashi, even going as far as to dodge Kakashi's ace move Raikiri in the anime, only being taken out by Naruto's Odama Rasengan, which the body that was being amped off Itachi's chakra does survive, so that does say something about Itachi, honestly. Now, Itachi also shows great feats even against Kakashi again, as even from their initial scuffle in the manga, Kakashi walks away far more battle damaged, and this is consistent as he's looking at 30% of Itachi's chakra and still tells Naruto, I can't take this guy alone. Something interesting to note too is that Itachi and Kisame also run out of chakra at similar times, showing that even without his Mangekyo abilities that we find out in part 1 are very taxing to Itachi, he can stretch his reserves to match Akatsuki members with the highest chakra. There's the obvious in that Itachi has multiple dojutsu on the level of Kamui, which would also just put him above Kakashi, along with all of his statements in reference to the Sannin themselves. So Itachi's placement here shouldn't really be a surprise to most people. At the number 1 spot, we have Minato, or the 4th Hokage. Now, there's no additional information for Minato, but the reasoning for him being this high stays the same. Now, some people might be mad or just be like, why is Minato up here still? The difference between somebody like Minato or the Sannin compared to like Hiruzen, for example, is that they get more and more information on top of them kind of having solid placements already that push them being at their spots. So additional scaling, additional statements, additional narratives that really keep these characters here. So even though Minato would have been here regardless, I do want to note that more information is going to come out that will just keep him here, just like it was in part 1 where he stayed at number 1, and then each arc more and more information or tidbits that kept him there are revealed. So the ranking for the Kazekage Rescue arc are Minato, Itachi Uchiha, the Sannin, Kisame, and Sasori, the 3rd Kazekage, Datara and Gaara, Might Guy and Kakashi, Granny Chiyo, Sakura and Naruto, and Kabuto.
一人救えねえやつが火影になんてなれるかよ。そうだろ、サスケ。
The next arc on the list is the Tenchi Bridge arc, which ranges from chapters 282 to 310. Now, despite how short this arc is, it does manage to shake the tree and lead to some new placements that fall down. That was a horrible analogy. My fault. I'm gonna stop with those. My bad. Side note for Tenchi Bridge, Chiyo's straight up getting cut. Her scaling to Sasori was already kind of difficult to use, but due to the introduction of stronger characters who have more solid scaling, she's just getting cut, honestly. Like, there's no real way to keep her on the list without just more headcanon. And I was already making a few inferences already, so it just wouldn't work long term. Third Kazekage is kind of close. He's still on this, like, top 10, but he's close. He's close. He's also one of the ones. So just a quick side note on that for why she's not here. Just, it's a little too weird. At the number 10 spot, we have Kabuto. Now, this is a bit tricky because it somewhat contradicts what I just said in the previous top 10, because Kabuto's showings in this arc are very few, but they are still a decent bit better than Naruto or Sai's. The reason Naruto and Sai are good gauges to use is because they're stated the strongest in their class or generation. Now, you can argue this is somewhat capped, since how would Danzo know how strong Naruto is since he left almost immediately to go on the Kazekage Rescue mission? However, it is shown to us that Danzo has Foundation Anbu everywhere, with his claim most likely originating from Naruto's performance against Kakashi during the bell test. Now, I would say that this is most likely referencing base Naruto, since this is the Naruto Danzo would have seen, as well as the fact that base Naruto is the one that was syncing up with Sai against Yamato in those simulations that they were doing before they actually went to the Tenchi Bridge. Now, Kabuto's a bit tricky overall, since we see good showings from him. Like, he can kick away Naruto's Rasengan attempts via shadow clones, although this is a clone, and Naruto notes when searching for Sasuke that he's still weak from being in the Nine-Tail state, showing great physical fatigue, falling over shortly after. He's also shown physically restraining characters like Sai, but at the same time can also just be physically restrained by Sai, so he's clearly not above them physically. The anime does extend Kabuto versus the likes of Sakura, Yamato, and Naruto into a full 3-on-1, with Kabuto even getting jumped by bees. I'm not making that up. He just has a 1v1 with nature. It's really funny, actually. A potential better metric for Kabuto is he gets bodied by Naruto's aura, which knocks Kabuto into Sakura, knocking her out, or her head hits the bridge, which knocks her out, which he does, in fact, survive this and actually heals himself, compared to Sakura, who was just knocked out, like, on the floor, fainted, gone. I would also venture to say he took more damage, as he was much closer to the initial blast, coughing up blood afterwards, unless you really think Sakura slowed him down or something to that extent. Sakura, who really shouldn't be that far off from Naruto. Now, the reason I also have Kabuto above is because even though these feats are all right, it's not like Naruto, Sai, or Sakura really have that great of feats in this arc either. Like, all this arc is Tenchi Bridge, where Naruto and Sakura get nerfed a little bit, where I'm going to talk about that in a second, along with Sai, who's just Naruto level, and it's not like Sai's really that impressive compared to anybody here either. It's for these reasons I have him at number 10. I will also say that you could just throw Naruto, Sai, potentially Sakura close to him, as I don't think he's actually that far above them, but more so his feats just kind of do paint him as a bit more impressive this arc, along with his previously established arsenal that we know to be very strong. I'm gonna be honest too, this placement isn't that relevant because the gap between number 10 and number 9 is it's pretty significant, so we're just gonna move on to that. At the number 9 slot, we have Sasuke and Yamato. I have Sasuke over Yamato, and I know this seems kind of crazy having Sasuke at number 9, but it'll make a lot more sense just when I explain it. Let's talk about Yamato first. We see Yamato fill in as a replacement for Kakashi, leading the Neo Team 7. It's never outright stated that he's above Kakashi, just that he was at the peak of the Anbu during the Third's reign. This, coupled with Yamato's use of the first Hokage's ninjutsu wood release, makes him very formidable. Yamato has showcased the ability to 2v1 the likes of Naruto and Sai, although Sai was capable of catching Yamato after or during these simulations. I also think it would just be kind of disingenuous to call these fights, so I won't. I just think it is worth noting. We also do see some pretty definitive limits for Yamato, as he doesn't think he could take on Orochimaru alone, coupled with admissions that he has no opening to jump in and interrupt Four Tails Naruto versus Orochimaru. So none of this is really that good for him or that impressive. A much better showing indicative of Yamato's higher ends is him restraining Four Tails Naruto for a prolonged period of time with basic wood style. You may say, well, wood style can restrain Bijou chakra. However, this isn't really stated anywhere during this point in the series, or at Data Book 3 at this point. point, or anything previously related to wood style, note that it has chakra suppression properties. Only with this 10th Edict of Enlightenment, an entirely separate technique, which is specifically noted to need the tail beast or Jinchuriki in question to be in possession of the chakra crystal, is this really present. This also being what's noted for Yamato to control Naruto by Jiraiya. Restraining Four Tails Naruto is a pretty good feat, especially since he does it long enough for Kabuto to walk over Yamato to initiate a wood style and grab his arm and for a conversation to ensue. So for a decent period, he can physically restrain somebody that was just throwing hands with Asani previously. We also see tidbits of Yamato's strength, like his wood style domed wall, being able to block and take no real damage from Four Tails Naruto's power up, which blew Orochimaru back and popped Sizing Bird. It should be pretty clear why this feat or these feats would be above someone of Kabuto's caliber, who we just previously saw isn't even relevant enough to withstand the aura from these characters. I can't really talk about why Yamato's paired with Sasuke until we get into Sasuke himself. Now, I finally get to talk about Heavy Sasuke. I don't get to talk about this character. I don't know why. Just the universe wills it so. But Sasuke should be above Three Tails Naruto at the bare minimum, as Orochimaru, after having his arm severed off, notes Naruto isn't even in the same league as Sasuke, which you can chalk up to shit talk, but I do think is consistent when you factor in some later stuff. We see that when characters like Sai, who are exposed to Three Tails and Four Tails Naruto, see Sasuke and are exposed to his Sharingan, Sasuke can make someone like Sai, who's just been noted to have all his emotions ripped out of them through a similar process to the Hidden Mist Village and their brute tactics. He can make Sai just feel fear, which, just not gonna lie, it's one of those things that I don't know if Sai thought he had aura, but it kind of killed it. With Sasuke later on forcibly undoing Sai's ink snake restraints that he had tried to put on Sasuke, or in the anime just like outright wraps around him with Sasuke shrugging them off. We have the obvious encounter with Sasuke versus Team 7, and I'll make it clear, I think Sasuke's stronger than any one of the members from Team 7 individually. The way the scene is shot with Sasuke just towering over Team 7 just insinuates or implies that he's above them, like that it's framed like he is the strongest one and he's just in an entirely different level standing above them. And I do think that is the case, but you do want to be clear and kind of just talk about everything. But I do want to make note that Naruto is pretty nerfed during this encounter, like it's pretty explicit, along with the fact that Sakura had been suffering drawbacks from the Nine Tails chakra, which is related to poison or compared to poison, which had been affecting her physical movements to where she even struggled to like hop on branches or like grab a branch. So I do think Naruto and Sakura aren't at 100%, but I also don't think that necessarily matters in this case. I just want to make note of it. The reason Sasuke and Yamato share a spot is due to Yamato's performance in the fight against Sasuke. Yamato is actually one of the few people here who's actually able to track Sasuke's speed when he dashes to Naruto. His eyes are the first one to turn, and he also notes that Sasuke is fast. We then see that Sai is able to block Sasuke's swing on Naruto, who is the only member besides Yamato who really doesn't have a nerf here. Sasuke mid Chidori stream on Naruto, Sai, and Yamato, just disrupting Yamato's wood style. Yamato's also able to intercept Sasuke's longsword strike on Sakura from the other side. Like, if he's on Sasuke's left and Sakura's on the right, he like maneuvers all the way around. This does end up stifling Yamato's movements and paralyzes him, which Yamato responds by pushing the sword out of himself via wood style, which visibly surprises Sasuke, who can then break out of Yamato's wood style dome, which we kind of touched on earlier. Yamato notes that he can't hold back any longer against Sasuke, with Sasuke preparing a jutsu to use against the group, which then Orochimaru arrives. Sasuke should be above Yamato due to Yamato having to get serious against base Sharingan Sasuke. When we know Sasuke can further amplify his strength via the curse mark, even from our limited part 1 knowledge, this would still be a massive amp. It's for these reasons that I have Sasuke and Yamato sharing a tier, but I do have Sasuke as the greater of the two. If you also want to look at Sasuke's databook entries, these aren't released or pointing to Sasuke at this point in the series. They actually show Sasuke later on midway through Shippuden. So literally all we have on Sasuke is just what's shown right here. At the number 8 spot, we have Kakashi and Guy. My reasonings for these two being here are the same. I'm not gonna lie, you may actually be able to make a case Sasuke and Yamato could be above these two, but I think them fighting Akatsuki members and just having better showings kind of lead me to point them up here. Like, Guy being able to fight anybody in the Akatsuki kind of leads me to leave him here, you know what I mean? Whereas Sasuke and Yamato almost only scale to each other in a weird way. So that's my reasoning for Kakashi and Guy over. I just think scaling off Akatsuki members is much better. At number 7, I have Deidara and Gaara. Again, they scale directly off Kakashi, who is very comparable to Guy. I think they have better showings. I think Deidara is overall presented to be stronger. A lot of my reasoning for them being here remains the same. At number 6, I have the third Kazekage. No real explanation needed. Number 5, I have full power Kisame and Sasori. Again, a lot of my same explanations. And I'm not shuffling by. There's literally no new information on these guys. At number 4, though, we have Four Tails Naruto. Now, we get the introduction of Naruto in his Four Tails state. This version of Naruto shoots up dramatically in strength. This version of Naruto actually is beginning to threaten or is threatening to the Sannin tier of Shinobi, almost killing Jiraiya, although specifics of this encounter are vague currently. We know it should have happened sometime closer to Shippuden since Naruto is shown having his black sleeve. So you can maybe say this more recent version of Four Tails Naruto is what's threatening to the Sannin tier, but this version of Naruto can just straight up have a prolonged bout with Orochimaru and his various snake techniques, consistently damaging and shredding apart this Orochimaru during the fight, and Orochimaru's not really able to damage him even with this Kusanagi blade. So Naruto's just insanely durable at this point as well, along with having the insanely broken ability of using a tailed beast bomb, which was stated to be able to kill Orochimaru via his own assessment and via the data book. This is kind of stock for Naruto, being able to one-shot pretty much everybody below him on this list, along with his basic strikes having even poison-like properties. So this Naruto's pretty ridiculous, definitely closest to that Sannin tier that we've seen so far, at least definitively. And this leads us into number 3, which is the Sannin. The Sannin also get more stock since Orochimaru can just box with Four Tails Naruto, actually knocking his body back and forcing Naruto into an Orochimaru-like oral rebirth where he pops out a new version of himself from his shoulder. Although I will note, Naruto in the Four Tail state is doing far more damage to Orochimaru, continuously forcing him to use oral rebirth and shredding his body apart. And even though I mentioned the Tail Beast Bomb, Orochimaru is able to summon 3 Rashomon gates that do block/divert the explosion. And Orochimaru can just physically drag this Naruto into a cliff with this Kusanagi blade. Although it doesn't outright pierce him, it does show that this Orochimaru can physically affect this Naruto. Orochimaru does note by the end of the bout that he's reached his limit, noting that his current host body continues to reject him, which may insinuate that he was never at full power from the start of the encounter. But due to the fact that Orochimaru has lost the use of his jutsu and can only use certain techniques now, a side note I'll throw in for Orochimaru is that Kabuto notes that Orochimaru is a superior player compared to Sasori. This is actually a mistranslation. The more accurate translation is that Sasori had always been planning to actually fight Orochimaru or take action against him. And the fact that he bent that wish and he's not here means that he's imprisoned or dead. It doesn't actually mention that Orochimaru is stronger. I don't think that changed anything. I just think that's kind of noteworthy since someone may bring it up. It creates a situation where full power Orochimaru and by extension the other Sannin would just be above Four Tails Naruto, whereas Four Tails Naruto is the one who can just physically start scrapping with the Sannin in their base stats. Maybe you think Orochimaru's super weak in here. Regardless, Naruto's just not at the Sannin tier. Not quite. Like, he's there, but not really. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost. Like, he can take... He's licking the floor of it. That's the best way I could describe it. Aside from horrible explanations, at number 2, we have Itachi. Not too much for Itachi alongside all my previous reasoning. The main thing here is that Itachi's reaffirmed here via Sasuke, noting neither he nor Orochimaru are strong enough to defeat Itachi on their own. So Itachi just continuously painted as this greater threat, even greater than the Sannin. Although Sasuke is probably just referencing Orochimaru's current state, Orochimaru in general notes, even in part 1, that he's not strong enough to defeat Itachi. So nothing new there. And at number 1, we have Minato. Now, Minato's been skirting by. I feel you. I don't want him here, but he is here for the same reasons. And bouncing off the full power Sannin is excellent stock, as we see what they can do even in a weakened state. And we see even what portions of the Nine Tails power, which Minato had combated earlier on in his career, which inevitably defeated him, can even do. So for Tenchi Bridge, at number 1, we have Minato. Number 2, we have Itachi. Number 3, we have the Sannin. Number 4, we have Four Tails Naruto. Number 5, we have full power Kisame and Sasori. Number 6, we have the third Kazekage. Number 7, we have Deidara and Gaara. Number 8, we have Kakashi and Guy. Number 9, we have Sasuke and Yamato. And at number 10, we have Kabuto. The next arc we have is the Immortal Duos arc, or the Akatsuki Suppression Mission, this ranging from chapters 311 to 342. At the number 10 slot, we have Yamato. Kakashi somewhat jokes in this arc that Yamato is someone he acknowledges as his equal. However, this is revealed to be a bit of sweet talk by Kakashi to pay for lunch that's referenced later on when he's actually serious. Yamato's Nine Tails suppression is a lot more noted in this arc, with him suppressing the Nine Tails, actually absorbing and chewing up the chakra from a version of Naruto with Three Tails, also just taking out Three-Tailed Naruto clones. The data book is much more explicit at this point as well, with Yamato's wood style actually countering tailed beasts, a technique possible only for one who can manipulate wood style. It silences even tailed beasts, or statements that the biggest reason why Yamato is selected to be the leader is because his hidden jutsu is the only thing that will keep the tailed beast inside of Naruto under control. So it's a lot more explicitly noted at this point in the series that the wood style is mainly there to just suppress or deal with the Nine Tails. So while I do think he still is very impressive, I think the series is more so setting up now that the wood Its style is generally for silencing tail beast chakra, which is a narrative that's obviously continued on later on. At the number 9 slot, we have Hidan and Asuma. Starting with Asuma, he's noted to be stronger than Shirku, who is defeated by Kakuzu and Hidan, although he has a much better performance in the anime, and Asuma does have an additional 5 million Ryo, more than Shirko on his bounty. Employing that One Piece logic of a higher bounty just means you're generally stronger. I'm not a One Piece guy, don't come at me crazy. We have some pretty impressive statements for Asuma, like him being unmatched in close quarters combat in Data Book 3, although we also see some pretty definitive limits as he notes Hidan and Kakuzu are far stronger than him. Asuma is shown on par with Hidan in close quarters, with Hidan actually tagging Asuma with his scythe, which is displayed to be faster, or I will say overall more dangerous than Hidan using short blades. Hidan does outright tag Asuma in an uncontested 1v1, leading to his win conditions being set. Granted, he used the swords impaled in him, but I don't really think this would have made a difference long term, as he carries his own blades that he uses to feint into a side stab later on in the fight. Asuma also just loses to Hidan despite having outside support of Shikamaru, Izumu, and Kotetsu, who directly stopped a hard stab that would have ended Asuma midway through the fight. Shikamaru was also the one to figure out Hidan's abilities and create a counter strategy, which led to Hidan leaving the circle via Shikamaru forcing him out with Shout of Possession, restricting him, which led to Asuma decapitating him. So overall, Asuma's best feats just are off of having better support against Hidan, and Hidan just does tag Asuma pretty uncontested in their 1v1 encounter. Again, he just needs a drop of blood. So for those reasons, Hidan is just above Asuma. I think it's pretty clear, but they are somewhat close to the point that I don't think it's maybe an entire tier difference or anything like that. Next up, we have Hidan, the immortal follower of Jashin, who can't die, and with a drop of your blood can invoke a ritual, turning any damage inflicted on him back to yourself. We get a self-admission on Hidan's introduction, who notes his attack speed is the slowest and his aim is the worst among the Akatsuki. However, Hidan is pretty satirical overall during this encounter. We see Hidan just annoy and absolutely enrage Yugito, who transforms into the Two Tails. Side note, the databook notes she gained mastery over her tail beast. However, this is actually a mistranslation, with the more accurate translation being she grew to the point where she can control the transformation into a tail beast by her own will, which is way more consistent with Kakuzu's statement of Yugito completely turning herself over to her tail beast spirit. Hidan's still kind of joking around with this Yugito, noting he's a trapped mouse now. We see after the fact that Hidan has defeated Yugito, with Kakuzu also uninjured after getting kind of pawed away. It's unclear whether they worked together after the fact to fight Yugito, but the chapter synopsis statement notes it was an effortless capture, so it doesn't add a whole lot of stock into Yugito. Hidan doesn't do too bad against Kakashi. They do kind of clash close quarters, with Hidan being the more offensive fighter there, along with the fact that he can outright tank Kakuzu's Wind Heart, which did seem to have an effect on Kakashi as he loses his Jonin jacket as a result. I think these placements are pretty self-explanatory. I think Hidan's just kind of the runt of the litter of the Akatsuki, but he's just the weakest of the strongest, which still makes him pretty strong. At the number 8 slot, we have a 4-way tie. I know, buckle up. This is a big one. We have Naruto, Kakashi, Sasuke, and Kakuzu. In this order, in my opinion. Let me explain why I have these characters ordered this way. Starting with Naruto. During this arc, Naruto goes through training to create an ultimate ninjutsu specifically for Naruto that will be more powerful than Naruto's Rasengan. To accomplish this, Kakashi creates a training regimen for Naruto, who notes Sasuke at this point has become too strong. Kakashi notes, however, that Naruto will just have to go beyond that with this training, potentially even surpassing Kakashi himself. The specifics are Naruto has to add a change in chakra nature, which we find out is Wind, a nature that is unrivaled in battle power, to power up the Rasengan. It's also revealed to us that Naruto has 4 times as much chakra as Kakashi. This doesn't mean he's 4 times stronger, but it does mean he has more chakra to play with. Naruto goes through large-scale shadow clone training, utilizing experience gained by the clones when the jutsu is released. This is relevant due to how, for example, if 2 clones did the same exercise simultaneously, you rack up twice the experience and have the time for training. And if you did this sort of technique with 1,000 clones, you would have the training done in 1,000th of the time. Basically a shortcut for Naruto to improve rapidly in a short time frame. The first half of this training was Naruto progressing from a small to large amount of change in chakra nature, specifically into Wind, in order to use it in actual battles. The whole goal of the training was for Naruto to create an S-rank level jutsu that even the 4th Hokage couldn't master. After Naruto had gone through this, it was time to actually add the Wind nature to the Rasengan. But Naruto had actually had roughly 9,800 hours solely towards adding the Wind nature to the Rasengan. And this, again, is not including previous training, there being 8,760 hours in a year, meaning Naruto got over a year's worth of training in one day, which Naruto, even without the Rasen Shuriken, would have gotten stronger, as his chakra control would have been improving rapidly via making repeated Rasengans over and over and over. I cannot overstate how impressive this is. Naruto is maintaining 200 clones or 100 Rasengans, which Naruto can just do now, with Naruto figuring he needs to delegate a clone specifically to control the wind chakra nature. 6 days pass and Naruto succeeds in adding the wind nature to the Rasengan. Now, the reason I bring all this up is because this is directly tied to Naruto and Kakashi's relationship strength-wise. By the end of the arc, when Naruto performs the technique, Kakashi notes that Naruto has outright surpassed him. Now, there is additional context to this and a bit of misconception, which I'm going to touch on in the next arc, because that actually, like, this arc ends on chapter 342 with Kakashi's most recent statement about Naruto being that he surpassed him with the Rasen Shuriken. So we actually can't have Naruto above Kakashi at this point. Even if you think Kakashi would win in a fight, it's just very safe to say that they're close, so they're just sharing the same tier. But Naruto, on top of going through this chakra control training, which would have made him overall stronger, and gaining the ability to accumulate experience through shadow clone use, also just has this S rank jutsu that only works 50% of the time, but still was able to one-shot Gyeonggu Kakuzu. And he was able to outwit Kakuzu on 2 separate occasions, this being a stronger variation of Kakuzu, as we know he gets outright faster when he merges with the chakra hearts as he gains more chakra, or when he just outright shifts forms into a more long-distance form after seeing Naruto's initial Rasen Shuriken. Now, I know I didn't talk about Guy, just imagine that Guy is next to Kakashi, because there's already 4 people on this tier, and if I had Guy, that it's gonna be 5, so just imagine it's Kakashi and Guy. Like, it's kind of split between them. I think Guy would just fit in right in this tier. Like, this is literally where he would be. We can't fit 5 sprites, bro. It's not in the budget. I'm sorry to let you know we can't do it. So imagine Guy's right next to Kakashi, and he's just here in spirit. Gotcha, cool. Next up, we have Kakuzu, the Immortal Bag Catcher. Kakuzu's performance in this arc is really impressive. We see that he is the more noted threat between the Immortal Duo, along with the fact that he has 5 hearts, meaning you have to kill him 5 times, with impressive jutsu like Doton Diamond Morph, which was pretty ridiculous, only really being pierced by Raikiri, which Kakuzu can somewhat react to, even on the ground as Kakashi passes him. The hearts pretty much make it that Kakuzu has access to all 5 nature releases, which makes him extremely formidable, but going even further than that, Kakuzu is able to combine them for a much more effective or potent jutsu, which we see as he combines fire and wind to overcome Kakashi's water wall. The hearts are impressive, being the chakra of former victims of Kakuzu, with the lightning heart utilizing a technique called false darkness, which is as strong as Kakashi's Raikiri, as actually burns his glove for Kakashi to actually cancel the technique out. So Kakuzu does have some impressive jutsu, but he also can merge with his hearts, raising him to an even higher level, which is a noted speed increase as he gains more chakra as the chakra in the masks fuse with himself, as we know they have their own chakras, with Kakashi noting there's a distinct speed increase after he fuses with the hearts. This being consistent as he pretty much gains like an omnidirectional defense where he can just shoot attacks out and play a ranged game against most opponents. So overall, Kakuzu has a great performance against Kakashi, and then we have a Naruto who does better against Kakuzu's strongest form, which we know is just outright stronger and faster than Kakuzu is normally, or his individual hearts. Next up, we have Kakashi. Now, I need to remind you guys that the conversation that Kakashi had with Naruto at Ichiraku Ramen didn't happen yet, so that Kamui point kind of gets thrown out the window. But what we do see from Kakashi is really impressive, as he's able to fight against Kakuzu while actively defending Ino and Choji, who really aren't that good support in this fight. All Choji does really is crack the Lightning Heart's mask, which Kakuzu uses to kind of replace the heart he lost anyway. We get definitive proof that Kakashi has gotten stronger in this arc due to him performing far more jutsu beyond his part 1 limitations. He goes from 4 Raikiri, putting him out of chakra in part 1, to performing 4 Raikiri, a water wall, and 2 more Raikiri, which is a pretty marked improvement in my opinion. So he does perform a lot better. We actually know he should be quite a bit stronger, even from his beginning of Shippuden counterpart. Him being above Asuma and Hidan is pretty self-explanatory. You know, Kakashi just cliffs any version of himself that Asuma could be relative to. He also just fights Hidan while having to deal with the hearts badgering him and shooting attacks at him. Kakashi also showcases the Rasengan, which is really impressive that he just has such a distinct and vast arsenal. The thing that separates Naruto and Kakashi at this point is that Naruto fights the Gyeonggu version of Kakuzu, or the Earth Grudge Fear, that is just the merged version that's faster and stronger than the original, whereas Kakashi does struggle somewhat with Kakuzu plus his hearts. Plus, there is a moment in the fight where Kakuzu is about to steal Kakashi's heart, and he's somewhat saved by Shikamaru, who just had some of Kakuzu's blood and gave it to Hidan. So while he does have a really good performance against Kakuzu, he was getting pretty hard pressed, and he did have some support if you want to count Ino and Choji, although I think like generally they didn't really, like, the pros didn't really outweigh the cons here. Like, he has one scene where he has to save them, and then there's another scene where they just attack the hearts and defend Kakashi. So calling them support is somewhat generous, I can't lie. I don't really think they did too much. Last up, we have Sasuke Uchiha. Now, again, his placement may seem kind of low, but you gotta understand, we don't really see that much from Sasuke, nor can we really use his databook entries quite yet, so he can't really be that much higher up than this general tier. With the whole narrative behind this arc that Naruto is trying to catch up to Sasuke, who's become absurdly strong. Now, whether or not he did is somewhat unclear. It's very vague. Like, you just kind of have this narrative aspect to go off of, along with the fact that Yamato told Kakashi all about Sasuke's abilities, and Kakashi thought this training would let Naruto surpass him. It's really just a narrative factor that implies that Naruto is just kind of approaching his level, and even then, like Yamato notes, he has to be wary of Sasuke's fire style, even with the Rasen Shuriken, so even that version of Sasuke is threatening to this Naruto. I just don't think there's enough evidence to suggest he'd be above him at this point. The only thing you can maybe say is Sasuke is shown training or just fighting an army at the end of chapter 342, but like, we don't know how much stronger he got. All it really does is prove that he could be above the measurement that Yamato provided, but you would never really be able to quantify it or use it. So that's my general order for these four based on this chapter range. Again, I think they're pretty interchangeable, but I do kind of lean towards Naruto, Kakashi, Kakashi, and then Sasuke. But realistically, if you wanted to reorder this, I think you can. I just think this is the most consistent route based on the info we have. At number 7, we have Deidara and Gaara. Not a lot of new information to really change this tier. We know Naruto and Kakashi are stronger than they were previously, but we don't know by how much, so it's kind of hard or near impossible to just say they're outright stronger than Deidara. Deidara also just does have a better feat of defeating the Three Tails, although it is noted the Three Tails was weaker due to lacking a Jinchuriki via not having enough intellect to control his power. Again, not really measurable. Deidara just should still be stronger because we haven't really seen the evidence or feats from Naruto and Kakashi to really put them above. Same thing with Hidan and Kakashi. They just haven't displayed the feats to say they'd be stronger than the likes of Deidara, who was already showing some pretty ridiculous feats at the beginning of Shippuden. Gaara obviously shares that spot. At number 6, we have the third Kazekage for a lot of the same reasons. At number 5, we have Kisame and Sasori for the same reasons as previously discussed. No real change needed. At number 4, we have Four Tails Naruto. Same reasonings as previously discussed. No real change needed. At number 3, the Sannin. Same reasonings. No real change needed. No new additional info. Same thing with Itachi. Same reasons as previously discussed. No change needed. At number 1, we have Minato. Now, Minato's narrative is pushed a bit more in this arc, with Naruto being noted by Kakashi, someone who's on Minato's squad, that he is the one person who could surpass the 4th Hokage. And Kakashi's word does have some weight behind it because he's been on Minato's squad, he's been in the presence of characters like Itachi, the Sannin, and multiple Akatsuki members, yet is still making this type of statement to Naruto. The back of Data Book 3 also notes that in reference to Naruto, he is the only one who can surpass the 4th Hokage. And you want something further, this is something I really should have brought up in the first video, but in the Naruto Innocent Heart Demonic Blood novelization, which highlights the Land of Waves arc novelization format that directly references the manga, it's actually outright stated that all of the Master Ninja in the village couldn't do anything against the Kyuubi, and it was the 4th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, the best and strongest shinobi of them all, that was able to defeat the Fox. So it's really just more Minato stock, and that's a point I probably should have brought up in the original video, along with maybe some other statements from that novel, but hey man, live and learn. Now, I know what you're saying. TG, this tier list is looking trash, bro. Like, this is... What am I looking at? I agree. We got certified bench warmers on the tier list right now. But do not worry. We are getting the heavy hitters next arc. So buckle up. This is where the video gets good. Halfway point. Black Flash Amp. We about to cook. Next up, we have the Itachi Pursuit, or Fated Battle Between Brothers arc, which ranges from chapters 343 to 402. This is the biggest shakeup we've seen in the tier list thus far, just due to how many higher tier characters are being presented in the series now. We have a couple characters who are getting dropped off this list, that being Four Tails Naruto, the third Kazekage, Sasori, and Gaara. Gaara's reasoning for being dropped off this list is due to how characters that have fought Deidara previously have gone through power increases, and we don't know the exact gap between Deidara and people like Naruto and Kakashi currently, since we know they are outright outright stronger than they were at the beginning of Shippuden, along with the fact that someone of Sasuke's caliber, as we'll soon discuss, performed similar feats to Gaara, or arguably above that beginning of Shippuden Gaara against Deidara. This extends to Sasori and the third Kazekage because we don't know how much stronger they were than Deidara, so because it was kind of already arbitrary, it's just impossible to give them a definitive placement, especially when we look at who's actually on the list now. It's pretty definitive, some of these placements. Four Tails Naruto is also getting dropped since he was questionably Sannin tier. You know, it was kind of ambiguous, it was kind of vague. Orochimaru didn't have his jutsu, and he had a body that was continuously rejecting him, which was making it so he couldn't fight for extensive periods of time, or just had a definitive limit or ceiling to how much chakra he could expend in that fight, making it so that version of Naruto isn't really placeable, especially since you're gonna see Sannin level is a title that you can really just get on the clearance aisle. Like, pretty much most of the people on this list now are just above the Sannin tier. So if you're not already kind of scaling to that, at least solidly below or above it, you're not really placeable, or you can't give a definitive placement. This also coupled with the fact that someone of Sasori's caliber has no further scaling chains even in this video, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to keep him here. Same thing with the third Kazekage, as even though Gaara shows up later, that doesn't necessarily link him back to his beginning of Shippuden himself or any other potential Kazekage, as he does show better feats. Let's get into the actual list so I can kind of explain or elaborate on some of these placements for you guys. At the number 10 slot, we have a four-way tie between Naruto, Kakashi, Guy, and Kakuzu. Now, I'm going to start with Naruto and then reverse engineer this, so just bear with me for a second. Now, the reason Naruto's number one is for a couple reasons. I know I mentioned a bunch of the stuff with him previously and how much stronger he is generally with like the 100 Rasengan metric, or just, you know, his chakra control training that improved his strength overall during his Rasen Shuriken training. And we do learn that he can't utilize the Rasen Shuriken consistently, but he should still have those abilities and strength increases I outlined previously. And some people may point to the scene at Ichiraku Ramen following this, where Kakashi tells Naruto he may surpass him. However, this is actually a Viz mistranslation. The more accurate representation is that Naruto and Kakashi stand shoulder to shoulder, or are just on par, with Naruto potentially even being stronger. So, which I'm not gonna lie, right? I'm not gonna lie. Take 2 seconds from, you know, watching this video and think about it. Kakashi had such belief in Naruto during his Rasen Shuriken training, said all this great stuff about him surpassing him, even making these internal concessions about it after he defeats Kakuzu. It's almost out of character for Kakashi to double back on this and just not believe in Naruto anymore, or give this weird assessment, especially to Naruto, who still does have mastery over the jutsu, just can't use it currently due to it being high risk, in a similar fashion to Kamui for Kakashi at this point. So Naruto is currently Kakashi level or somewhere above. If you have Kakashi over, maybe due to Kamui or just his overall arsenal, the kinetic acuity of the Sharingan, I think that's fine. Just on a benchmark, Naruto is Kakashi level. We have to make that clear. Right under him, we have Kakashi Hatsuki himself. We find out post-Kakuzu fight that Kakashi believes he would have been able to high-diff Kakuzu with the use of Kamui hospitalizing him after the fact. From what we've seen prior, it seems consistent that Kakashi was going to Kamui the fire style wave, plus Kakuzu himself during this encounter, so I do put him in front of Kakuzu for these reasons, but I don't think it's like a crazy gap. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think the gap is night and day. I think they are very close. The Kamui metric does just put him a little bit ahead. Last up, we have Guy. Now, Guy's a little interesting since you can maybe say he's over these characters due to his initial Data Book 3 statement, with him being more than equal to anybody in the Akatsuki. It's just very difficult to use that since we don't have there's no feats to really back it up. I know he defeats the 30% Kisame clone, but that's his limit. And you could say, okay, well, maybe 6 Gate could also fight people in the Akatsuki and beat them up. We don't know for sure, and we don't know what the higher gates necessarily do. So I think Guy being here is very fair. And until we see anything more, I think he's always going to be kind of relevant, especially if you go up the Kamui metric I mentioned earlier. It's just like, you can only argue so much based on the limited info and statements we have for him, especially since everybody who's above him or at this tier can now fight Akatsuki members. So just being able to fight Akatsuki members isn't enough to just put him way higher. At the number 9 slot, we have a 3-way tie, that being Sasuke, Deidara, and Kisame. Now, it may seem kind of whack to knock Sasori off of the list and keep Kisame on. Well, Kisame does have more scaling later on, which is why he can stay on this list. But he also does make a note about Deidara after he's defeated by Sasuke, where he notes he thought Deidara was one of the tougher people in the Akatsuki, or just one of the overall stronger members, kind of implying that Kisame is just comparing that to himself, like, oh, compared to me, I thought he was pretty strong, which kind of leads to the idea that Deidara is on a similar tier or somewhat comparable to someone of Kisame's caliber, which kind of keeps him on this list. The reason that Datara is over Kisame is that we have more feats from him to suggest that he'd be higher, and we don't know the exact gap between him and Kisame. So a lot of, like, Kisame is still here, but it's more so lack of info that's really keeping him from just soaring up higher, even though he does have good implications and decent statements at this point. We also know Kisame defeated the Four Tails Jinchuriki Roshi. However, again, we don't know how strong Roshi is, so this isn't really the best metric to just say Kisame is stronger than Datara, as we just don't have enough information to really make that assessment. Next up, we have Datara and then Sasuke. Now, I'm going to talk about Sasuke first and then talk about Datara. That might seem weird, like I'm jumping around, but it will just make it easier to understand this. I mean, on a surface level, yeah, they fought, and it was a high difficulty fight, so no duh, they're kind of next to each other. But talking about Heavy Sasuke, the GOAT, MVP, pretty much has eclipsed his previous placement due to having 6 months of training from Naruto and Yamato's initial assessment of Sasuke's strength, so he can't really be held to that previous, benchmark that maybe Naruto, Kakashi, and Yamato were kind of holding him to. Now, starting off, all of Sasuke's data books are now usable, such as the data book that notes he has power that exceeds the Akatsuki, which the actual translation is much closer to a well-honed combat ability. The power can even surpass the Akatsuki, which kind of does have different meaning, as one says he's directly above Akatsuki members, and another says his power could even surpass the likes of the Akatsuki, which again is similar lore to characters below him, and I think just means he's Akatsuki level, or maybe potentially his curse mark could elevate him to surpass the likes of a lot of Akatsuki members. When we first cut back to Sasuke, we actually do see him kind of ambush Orochimaru on his deathbed, and we do see Orochimaru is actually able to react to Sasuke's blitz attempt across the room to try and slash his head off, showing his true form, that being the White Snake, which Sasuke is also able to take down. Sasuke is probably stronger than Orochimaru's initial assessment of him due to him. It's kind of implied he was training in secret because Orochimaru doesn't recognize the change in Chidori form, that being the Chidori spear, which Sasuke uses to shoot through the door. So you could even say that his power was beyond the likes of Orochimaru's expectations, which is kind of presented as such, as he's able to absorb Orochimaru during the ritual. Now, I will say, you could argue that Orochimaru being absorbed by Sasuke isn't really a big power boost, as it's only noted to amp his healing factor or let him heal quicker due to the White Snake's powers, and grant him additional abilities like the Orochimaru style substitution. This is also further noted in the data books. I don't think it's crazy to suggest Sasuke got stronger via absorbing Orochimaru. I just don't think it's measurable or treated as like some extreme amp, is more so what I'm saying. Sasuke also had not planned on absorbing Orochimaru, yet still intended to fight Itachi, which also plays into it potentially not being that big of an amp, but it doesn't really matter. I just more so thought I'd touch on that. If you think Heavy Sasuke absorbing Orochimaru is a huge amp, I think that's entirely fine, as pretty much everybody above him would be above him regardless. We see Sasuke is able to fight and combat Datara, having a slight speed edge on Datara. Now, this kind of plays into Datara stuff, but I think people overestimate the speed gap between Datara and Sasuke. Like, the only point where Datara notes Sasuke's fast, or like the biggest point, is when Sasuke body flickers over to Datara and then attempts to slice him. Now, for those who aren't familiar, body flicker is just a short-term speed boost that mainly amps travel speed, like Sasuke's ability to travel to Datara, but he can't actually attack while in body flicker. It doesn't really work like that. So Sasuke body flickered to get close to Datara, and then when he actually swung, Datara dodged it. So I don't think Datara, it's kind of similar to Datara versus Gaara, but I think the idea is Sasuke and Gaara had a slight stat edge on Datara, but not to the point where they could really blitz him outright. The idea is presented in this fight that Sasuke's had a bit of a disadvantage since Datara is a long-range fighter, which is a direct counter to close-range fighters. The data book notes this, with it also supplementing that Datara's only real way to beat Sasuke was to blow himself up, and Sasuke does somewhat imply that he had somewhat of a counter or reserve jutsu that he could have used against Datara. We find out later that this is most likely Kirin. I'm going to touch on that when we get to the Itachi stuff. But he did come away with the W, and Datara wasn't really able to push his reserves to the point that Sasuke couldn't control Orochimaru. So I think him being slightly above Datara is entirely fine. And I think the fight is close. I just have Sasuke like greater than, with like a little, like the relative mark, you know what I'm saying? Like something like that. Something like that. They're obviously in the same tier. I just have Sasuke at the top of the tier since he didn't exhaust all his options compared to Datara. And you can obviously say like Sasuke countered Datara, but I think his stats are also just close. Like Sasuke's able to jump up with his curse mark and fly away from a landmine that went off on his foot to avoid substantial damage. So clearly he's close. Clearly they're not that far stat-wise. and this was kind of like that high IQ matchup based encounter, but Sasuke still had a little bit more in the reserve tank. And you could obviously see this as he summons Manda and places him under Genjutsu to survive the C0 blast. Sasuke also does make a bit of a concession when getting questions how he's so battle damaged if he defeated Orochimaru, with Sasuke noting that Orochimaru was weakened to begin with, which is kind of why Sasuke was able to take him down. Now, if you want to say Heavy Sasuke is above Armless Orochimaru, I think that's fine. It doesn't really change too much since the next tier up is literally the Sannin tier. So even if you were under that interpretation, it would just mean he's still weaker than full power Orochimaru who could use all his jutsu. So whichever interpretation you're under, it doesn't really change whoever's above him on the list. And Sasuke during his Itachi fight is pretty impressive. He's able to overwhelm Itachi's fireball with the use of his partial transformation curse mark, which is noted to be on par with the likes of Kimimaro. He's also able to break through Itachi's Tsukiyomi, which is something the data book and chapter statement kind of note. Now, I do think Itachi was holding back the Tsukiyomi and Sasuke broke through it. Like, Itachi could have not been going all out in the Genjutsu, and Sasuke could have still broke it, which I do think is the case here. He can also circumvent or get around Amaterasu, which is noted to be the most powerful physical attack that can't be blocked or evaded. So Sasuke is pretty ridiculous at this point, and I feel like a lot of people dismiss his feats in the Itachi fight because Itachi's sandbagging so crazy and all the factors surrounding him, which I get to an extent, but I also do think this Sasuke is just really strong at this point. It's just he got faced with a literal demigod at this point in the verse. Next up at number 8, we have Tsunade, who just represents the base Sannin tier. Pretty simple reasoning. Pretty much everybody below them just has statements directly below the Sannin, or the Sannin have higher implications to put them above everybody below them at this point in the series, at least. At the number 7 slot, we have Hanzo the Salamander. Hanzo is somebody that Jiraiya believed nobody could have defeated by themselves. Jiraiya noting to Garotora, the toad that holds Naruto's key that corresponds to Naruto's seal, that he's going to fight a very tough opponent, implying that someone who could defeat Hanzo, who defeated a much more green Sannin trio, is a high difficulty opponent for someone of Jiraiya's caliber. If you go off the notion that beating a much more green or being stronger than a much more green Sannin trio is kind of a feat, you may be able to put Sakumo right back up here. I'm not going to, because bro never appears again until like the afterlife in the Pain Assault. So, you know, I'm just saying, like, if you wanted to put him here, I think there's a case for it. I'm not going to. I'm not repping 2 pages of scans. He's trash. He's ass. He's clearance rack, budget, coupon savings. Go, you know, 20% off Kakashi. I'm not talking about it. At the number 6 slot, we have Sage Mode Jiraiya and Hydra Orochimaru. Now, when I say Hydra Orochimaru, I am referencing the art of the 8-headed serpent, which is described as using the regenerative powers of the white snake as his vehicle, and Orochimaru transforms into an 8-headed white serpent appearing from Sasuke's curse mark, being noted to have even surpassed Orochimaru himself. This is essentially just the Sannin plus tier now. Pretty much everybody who's here. This version of Orochimaru believes he can fight off or regenerate against Itachi Susanoo, as he notes being stabbed by its sword is a puny attack, until it's revealed to be the legendary Totsuka Blade, which steals Orochimaru. The 8-headed serpent's kind of weird. You can low-key argue it might be a summon that Orochimaru appears out of, since when Orochimaru is defeated, like the summon kind of poofs away, or like the jutsu poofs away as a summon would when they're kind of defeated, or a shadow clone. So you could maybe say this is like a summon that Orochimaru can envelop or use jutsu from, even though he doesn't have his jutsu currently. It's kind of weird, but yeah, this version is just above the Sannin tier. Right next to him, we have Sage Mode Jiraiya. Now, I personally have Sage Mode Jiraiya over Hydra Orochimaru for a couple of different reasons. I think he has better showings, more showings, higher grades of jutsu. Let's talk about it. Jiraiya even infiltrating the Rain Village is noted by Pain's Rainmaker technique to be a threat from the feel of his chakra, so we already know Jiraiya is somewhat of substantial strength. When you stack on Sage Mode, it becomes something a little different. He notes that he'll go from the Prodigal 3 to a Hermit Sage, kind of implying it's like the next evolution, which was kind of the topic of his conversation with Pain, or just an entirely different tier or level for Jiraiya. Jiraiya is also bolstered by Fukasaku and his wife, who are 2 of the exalted Toad Sages who can succeed the Great Toad Sage. Ma and Pa really exist as kind of a 3-person squad with Jiraiya because they can act independently, throw smoke bombs down, fire jutsu, and just support him overall in battle as just separate fighters with unique abilities that can either just counter what Jiraiya can't or just bolster his own existing jutsu. Sage Mode itself is also presented as being pretty insane, noting that all those who wield Senjutsu surpass ninjutsu, and blending it with his chakra, Jiraiya is able to dramatically increase the level of ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. So it's an overall amp on all his stats, with Senjutsu overall being stronger than most ninjutsu we've seen thus far. Jiraiya overall does have a very good performance against Pain. Now, I'm going to kind of talk about this more, like mention it when I'm discussing Pain, as obviously Pain is above Jiraiya, even from all the information we have present currently. but he does think he could take the paths 1v1 despite jutsu like his Odama Rasengan or his Toad Oil Bath being countered, which was a big reason Jiraiya actually had to retreat in the first place because his ninjutsu was being absorbed via one of the paths of pain. And we do see he's able to hold his own or just maneuver around the paths even when they're together in the hallway or confined space of the Hidden Rain Village, while Ma and Pa charge up the Gemarin Show or Toad Confrontation Chant, which is noted in the data book to be outright the strongest genjutsu. Jiraiya is also able to pull one of the pain bodies into the sealed Toad dimension, even when 3 more are revived and he only has 1 arm, and potentially defeat that path of pain one-on-one in said Toad dimension. Jiraiya being so strong, in fact, that Pain notes without their secret, they couldn't have won against him. So he is pretty ridiculous, and I do favor him over Hydra Orochimaru just because he has a wider range of jutsu, like the Odama Rasengan, which could carve mountains, Ma and Pa, ridiculous genjutsu, versus this Hydra Orochimaru that has great regen, but doesn't have access to any of Orochimaru's jutsu, and is kind of weird higher end wise. We don't get to see too much from it. At number 5, we have Itachi Uchiha. That's how you know we're in big boy territory. We see his fight against Sasuke where he performs very well. We see he's able to weave signs faster than Sasuke's Sharingan can perceive in their Shuriken clash, even stopping Sasuke's Fuma Shuriken with the basic kunai. He has a good performance against Sasuke in this fight, which we'll obviously touch on in a second, but we know that his left eye possesses the most powerful genjutsu and his right eye possesses the most powerful physical attack, that being the Amaterasu. And with those 2 powers, he wields the mighty Susanoo, his final trump card. In the face of God's powers, all attacks, whether from a material or astral body, ninjutsu or physical, lose their meaning. Now, Itachi actually did get his Susanoo destroyed by Kirin. He just didn't use the Yata as it's not noted, and Itachi directly attributes him surviving Kirin to the Susanoo itself, not the Yata which is introduced right after. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't bring up Kirin more for Sasuke, the Kirin that Sasuke utilized against Itachi is a more amped version, utilizing the heat surrounding the hideout being produced off the Amaterasu flames. I do think Sasuke could probably produce a weaker Kirin by himself. It wouldn't really make sense that he would know how to do a jutsu if he hadn't done it prior. And he kind of does allude to this at the beginning of Shippuden when he was going to use the technique, or kind of implies he could have done it solo against Deidara, which probably means he just needed more fire style to actually perform it, or it required more prep on Sasuke's end compared to Amaterasu doing most of the legwork in his fight with Itachi. So this version of Kirin is almost an outlier and is actually very strong. It did break Itachi's Susanoo, which was used to guard against it. So I don't want to take the feat away from Sasuke, more so just want to provide additional context so you don't take it out of proportion. Itachi with the Susanoo wields the spirit weapons, the Totsuka Blade, a spirit weapon with no physical form being noted as a sword of sealing, trapping and sealing away all those it pierces into a genjutsu world of drunken stupor for all time. This, coupled with the Yata, another spirit weapon, is said to deflect all things with the power to change every one of its properties in accordance with the attributes of whatever attack it's being hit with. This is showcased with the technique enveloping the Susanoo in response to Sasuke's paper bombs. With the Totsuka Blade and Yata, Itachi is regarded as invincible, at least in Black Zetsu's interpretation. Diction that's only really noted or used alongside Pain of all people. It's also noted post-fight by Black Zetsu that Itachi was stronger than what was shown in the fight, moving strangely, coughing up blood, and getting hit by attacks like Sasuke's rigged Fuma Shuriken, which he should have been able to evade normally, leading Black Zetsu to the idea that he may have been harboring some serious damage from beforehand, which we know is the case. He was holding back, but still pushed Sasuke to a certain degree to get the Orochimaru's curse mark out of him, was suffering sight deterioration, even being blind towards the end of the fight, and was just ill all around. So Itachi was clearly not at 100%, nor is this fight his upper limit. Itachi should also just be above the Sannin Plus tier due to his speed blitz on Orochimaru, where Orochimaru was like, in response to Itachi tagging him with the Totsuka Blade while blind and on death's door. So even if you want to potentially argue Sage Mode Jiraiya over, Itachi does just speed blitz the higher Sannin form in such a weakened state that it's almost just better stock compared to what Sage Mode Jiraiya has. And we don't really have any scaling chains to also connect Sage Mode Jiraiya and Hydra Orochimaru. It's just that Itachi has such a good feat against a higher than Sannin form, along with everything else around him, that even though his higher ends are questionable, I think they are much closer to someone like maybe Pain than they are Sage Mode Jiraiya, as I think there is a bit of a disparity between Pain and Sage Mode Jiraiya himself. Itachi stocks go up a little more when you look at the Amaterasu sealed in Sasuke's eye that is fired off at Madara, which propels Madara into darkness, with Madara seemingly re-emerging unharmed, noting it's good Itachi did know everything about him, or else he'd be dead. I will note, however, Sasuke is the one who misfired the Amaterasu, as you see his pupil move over with the jutsu being set to activate upon contact with Madara's Sharingan, so it's actually probably intended to actually hit Madara's eye of all things. We don't know how Madara currently survived due to, lack of knowledge on Madara and his abilities at this point, so it can't really be used as a crazy feat for Itachi, as it's presented as an off-guard trap that doesn't even amount to too much, at least at this point in the series. The audience, me and you, the people, along with Sasuke, learned that Itachi was actually a double agent, was spying on the Akatsuki, which puts all his previous statements into question, as now pretty much everything Itachi said was cap, which means that a lot of the restrictions that we kind of had him at with the Jiraiya statement aren't really that objective anymore. So Itachi realistically just has like an unquantifiable higher limit, but based on what we've seen, this is really the highest you can place him. At number 4, we have Pain, the touted strongest man in the Akatsuki, who possesses the legendary Rinnegan, the most noble and sublime of the 3 Ocular Jutsu, also noted to immediately be superior to Kagezu, as Konan dismisses the idea of Naruto being a problem for Pain off of destroying 2 of Kagezu's hearts. He's able to overwhelm Sage Mode Jiraiya in terms of physicals, jutsu absorption, and summoning jutsu. The culmination of the 3 and shared vision convinced Jiraiya he'll be defeated if he really doesn't retreat. Pain showcases all of this as he dominates Jiraiya physically while blinded in a smoke bomb, reacts to Jiraiya's Kabari Senbon, his fastest jutsu, with the widest attack range. I touched on Jiraiya's jutsu being nullified being a big obstacle for him, with Jiraiya noting, even in Sage Mode, I'll be killed. I never imagined he would be this strong. We're shown even before the fight that there's 6 Pain bodies in total, but we also learned that Pain can revive the defeated Pain bodies, with Pain only using 3 out of 6 unique abilities that were not really shown, at least in the Jiraiya section of the fight. And we see this as while Jiraiya's off guard, they could blow off Jiraiya's arm. Pain notes how, without their secret, they wouldn't have won against Jiraiya. However, due to this secret being a mystery, this isn't really usable to say Jiraiya is over Pain. During this time period, Pain is just ridiculously shrouded in mystery. Like, it's an insane amount of mystery. Bro's got aura. I don't know what to tell you. Even Pain's weapons, the mysterious black blades, are able to agitate Jiraiya's chakra. So Pain just has a lot of ridiculous abilities, great implications, and we haven't seen everything he can do. Data Book 3 also supplements this by noting the notoriously strong members also just listen to Pain, regarding him as invincible. So his placement here should not be a surprise to literally anybody. I think it's pretty clear. We haven't seen the full extent of what Pain can do. So him being this strong or this high up is no surprise. At number 3, we have Minato. You know, like the second Kung Fu Panda movie where they're like inner peace, like that being a thing, and like they move the water around their body. You know what I'm talking about? That I feel like I got that now that Minato is no longer at number 1. I feel like I've achieved a state of pure bliss. Like I've hit nirvana. Let me shut the fuck up and talk. For starters, I do think you could make a case for Pain over Minato at this point. It's just a little vague since these two don't have connecting scaling chains to put them over one another. And if you say that Jiraiya thought Minato was over him holistically, even including Sage Mode, that would still give him better stock to be put over Pain, at least at this point. But it kind of goes hand in hand with number 1 and number 2. So I'm actually going to just brush over Minato for just a second and just talk about 1 and 2, and then it'll explain why Minato's at number 3. At number 2, we have Madara Uchiha, who's noted to have declared war on Konoha as an Avenger, utilizing the QB against Hashirama along with his own strength. Itachi notes, and this is something Jiraiya talks to Garotora about, that 16 years ago when the Nine Tails assaulted Konoha, it was Madara's doing, and that Minato stopped that in short. However, it's never stated that Minato defeated Madara or what the details of the encounter were, just that Madara looked at the QB and said sick him to Konoha. That's really what's presented here. All you really need to know for these 3 is that Hashirama is noted to be the shinobi who stood atop of the shinobi world in the manga, supplemented via the data book that note his skill manipulating both wood style ninjutsu and tailed beasts made Hashirama without peer in the shinobi world. So Hashirama just defeats Madara plus the QB. Madara is able to control the QB and potentially have fought Minato or just defeated Minato during the Nine Tails attack. We don't really know. Madara at this point in the series is equally clouded in mystery. He's very weird. So the way I'm taking Madara is I'm looking at him holistically, because Obito at this point in the series is still presented as Madara, and it's not really clear what his state is. Like, he doesn't have the same Mangekyo, he doesn't have the same Sharingan as he does in the flashback, so that we don't know the exact idea. So we're using the Madara that fought Hashirama as the basis here. This is something that's going to get cleared up for us in the next 2 arcs, but you essentially have Hashirama who defeats Madara plus the QB, Madara who had fought Hashirama repeatedly and was commonly a rival to him, and then you have Minato who defeated the QB at the cost of his own life, which is very vague. Again, we just know he did quote-unquote defeat the QB, at least with the information we have present. I think Minato and Pain's upper limits are still unknown. I think just generally being more comparable to the QB is better stock off of the incomplete intel we have on Pain, but we really don't know. Again, Pain and Madara at this point are so there's so much mystery surrounding them at this point in the series. Like, Kishimoto's very stingy with the details that it's really hard to make these objective claims about them at this point, which is also why I'm looking at Madara holistically here and not just in the orange mask form. Another note for Madara too is that even while masquerading as Tobi and playing around, he was able to stonewall the likes of Kakashi, Yamato, Naruto, Shino, and all these other shinobi in a squad that was created in a Kakashi's assessment to take down Itachi Uchiha. Now, it's unlikely Kakashi knows exactly how strong Itachi is, but considering that, that's also kind of an insane feat, as they were planning on taking Itachi hostage, and Kakashi should have knowledge on 2 out of 3 of Itachi's main jutsu, that being the Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi. So even this version of Madara that we don't know too much about has access to space-time ninjutsu that is noted by Kakashi to surpass Minato's or the 4th Hokage's. Still has some impressive feats, and I feel like a lot of people overlook that Tobi feat, but he literally did just stop them from advancing over to Itachi and Sasuke's fight, which is pretty crazy. At number 1, we have Hashirama Senju. At number 2, we have Madara Uchiha. At number 3, we have Minato. Number 4, we have Pain. Number 5, we have Itachi Uchiha. Number 6, we have Sage Jiraiya and Hydra Orochimaru. At number 7, we have Hanzo the Salamander. At number 8, we have Tsunade, or like the base Sannin tier. Number 9, we have Sasuke, Deidara, and Kisame. Number 10, we have Naruto, Kakashi, Kakuzu, and Guy. For the next arc, we have the invasion of Konoha, or Pain's Assault, ranging from chapters 403 to 449. At the number 10 slot, we have Killer Bee and Sasuke Uchiha. Now, this may seem kind of weird and low for these characters, but let me kind of talk about it and it'll make sense. Starting with Sasuke, we know that Sasuke during the Bee fight is still in a state of recovery from his battle. As Jugo notes, he's still affected physically and it is impacting his physical movements. This makes sense as he lost the regenerative powers of the White Snake via losing the Curse Mark, another debuff going in. And Orochimaru's Curse Mark was actually a heavy hit to Sasuke, as along with losing ways to augment himself power-wise or just implement Curse Mark abilities such as flight into battle, he lost impressive techniques such as the Orochimaru-style substitution, which enabled Sasuke to avoid the Amaterasu. What Sasuke gained from his fight with Itachi, however, was a much greater asset, that being the Mangekyo Sharingan, which the databooks directly note will surely make his stats go up even further. Now, Sasuke during his fight with Bee is clearly weaker, right? I don't feel like I need to elaborate on that a crazy amount. There are multiple examples where he would have died without the aid of Karin or Jugo assisting him in that fight, just due to Bee's superior stats or just having counters for things Sasuke was employing. To even tag Bee with a Chidori, he needs the aid of Jugo and Suigetsu as well. So clearly Sasuke needed support to actually perform well in this fight. My problem with this fight and how people analyze it is there's a lack of objective consensus on it, just due to the fact that it's either Sasuke agenda or Sasuke slander with this fight. There's rarely a middle ground. Like, dudes don't want to give credit to Sasuke where it's due, but then also just want to take every opportunity to shit on him. So let's look at this fight. At the start of the fight, he's able to keep pace with base Bee's movements to the extent that he could parry them off for a short amount of time, but still does lose that exchange. This is mainly due to Bee's unorthodox movements, making it harder for Sasuke to use the Sharingan in order to counter Bee's physicals. We do know, however, that this is kind of the cap for Sasuke's physical reactions, as we see later on in the fight, he's capable of dodging Bee's long-range linear moving lariat via tapping off Bee's head and spinning over. This type of movement is noted to be in a linear fashion, which is what the Sharingan's kinetic acuity was designed to counter, or just physical movements in general, making it so Sasuke had an easier time to dodge, as Bee was literally moving in a straight line from a long-ass distance, giving Sasuke more time to perceive Bee's movements. So had Bee just done a lariat much closer, it's unlikely Sasuke would be able to dodge or just do the same thing he did. I will note Sasuke does have an improved Genjutsu that was able to suppress Bee's movements, which is a good feat. However, Bee does just counter Genjutsu in the sense his Bijou partner can snap him out of it before he takes serious damage. It's very clear that Sasuke's support plus Bee's lax disposition during the fight made it so Sasuke could perform that well. Like, Bee didn't need to go into full Gyuki mode, which made it so Sasuke had a bigger target for Amaterasu. He could have just won that fight had he continued fighting in his V1 stage. But to say he isn't a threat to Bee if his physicals were at 100% or with his Mangekyo Sharingan is a stretch. So take Sasuke's placement here as his performance mixed with the idea that he'd be performing much better if he wasn't still suffering physical drawbacks. So he does have higher physicals that he can show with jutsu that are effective against Bee, even though Bee is the stronger fighter. You can have a technique that is effective on somebody and somebody else be stronger than you. I feel like a lot of people just take these over overly crass generalization with a lot of Naruto fights when I think they are really nuanced, especially at this point in the series. Now, above Sasuke, we have B. Now, it may seem weird to have B in the same tier as Sasuke, especially since he was so much stronger, but let me explain, because it actually makes a lot more sense. He's obviously above Sasuke, as he's shown having a very dominating performance against Team Taka, only really being taken down to hubris or ego or just wanting to show off against Team Taka, or having Sasuke's team intervene, like having Suigetsu being amped off of being in water, which actually is a bit of a crazy amp for Suigetsu because it makes it that he goes from getting slapped around by base B to being able to push back the complete A-tails. Now, what I want you to keep in mind is we have no reference for how strong B is compared to other characters at this point. The Bijou and Jinchuriki at this point have gotten pretty low diffed by Akatsuki members on every on-screen encounter thus far, maybe with the exception of Gaara, painting a rather unimpressive portrait of the Bijou or Jinchuriki strength-wise. I do think Killer B is above Sasuke, or can be interpreted as above Sasuke, as Sasuke only really has one technique that B reacts to. His tentacles actually go to block Amaterasu, but he really couldn't do anything against, and Amaterasu is threatening to B. B notes surviving Amaterasu was a last-minute type of adjustment or plan that he kind of thought up on the spot via Sasuke cutting one of the A-tail's tentacles. But then obviously B didn't need to transform to beat Sasuke. So you kind of see the nuance with this fight. I will also say too, Sasuke being noted among the top 2 strongest people B has fought is really useless, as it's zero reference we can use for B or Sasuke. So B is just pretty objectively above this version of Sasuke physically, but that doesn't really place him confidently against any of the people above him at this point. So don't take this as B being weak or B being low. It's just more so B and Sasuke only really kind of scale off each other in these forms at this point in the series. A slight note for Sasuke too post B fight is he notes his new powers are strong enough to take down Konoha, which we don't know the specifics of, but do seem to implicate he has gotten stronger, at least to the point he doesn't think Taka needs to rely on the chakra monsters known as the Bijou at this point in the series. And when talking to the A-Tails, B notes post fight that he kind of got carried away, which explains why he went full A-Tails, and he notes this during the fight. Pretty much did to scare the socks off Team Sokka. Didn't really work. They were sandals, but hey. Next up, we have Tsunade, or the base Sannin tier. Tsunade's here for the same reasons. Now, I do think it is a little questionable how the Sannin tier relates to the likes of B or Sasuke during this point. Again, I think I've outlined a lot of the problems with Sasuke and B. I think if you say Sasuke physically is inferior to the version that still believes he's below a full power Sannin, this would put more stock into the Sannin being above Killer B and Sasuke at this point. So I still have the Sannin tier above, just due to lack of evidence or feats for these versions of Sasuke and B, as they don't really scale outside anything. Now, Tsunade in this arc is actually pretty impressive. She's able to enable the villagers to survive Pain's chaotic Shinra Tensei, which just flatlines the entire Leaf Village. Pouring her chakra into Katsuyu is the reason that the villagers, or a good portion of them, were able to survive Pain's chaotic Shinra Tensei. But aside from that, she's really just cruising off this previous statement surrounding the Sannin. That's the bottom line. At number 8, we have Hanzo. Pretty much same reasons as I had previously. So yeah, not too much to change on number 8. At number 7, we have Hydra, Orochimaru, and Sage Mode Jiraiya. A lot of the same reasons. We do get a bit more information that keeps Jiraiya above Orochimaru, at least in my eyes. Madara somewhat chides Pain for struggling with Jiraiya, noting for unstoppable, all-knowing Pain to have had their hands full means Jiraiya must have lived up to the reputation, which does come across as Madara kind of poking fun at Pain, which leads Conan to reaffirm that Pain is invincible. No matter what happens, they will capture the QB. With that being said, though, I do think this is just credit for Pain and Jiraiya both. I think it just means Jiraiya is strong, and Pain is also strong, and for Pain to struggle with somebody is something that Madara can kind of joke at. Kakashi also notes that it's kind of crazy that Jiraiya would take on all 6 of the paths of Pain at once, which does kind of imply Jiraiya's above him. This is actually a legit statement, as Jiraiya did fight all 6 paths, albeit for a short duration, as all 6 did lunge at him and he did pull one into the Toad dimension, even while all 6 paths were looking at him with shared vision, which is a pretty impressive feat of itself. So the statement overall stands fine, and I think it is perfect confirmation that these Sage Mode level users are just above the likes of Kakashi at this point in the series. It's also revealed to us that the secret that Jiraiya had transcribed on Fukasaku's back was that the real one was not among them, which is the secret that Pain was referring to. Pain could be referencing the fact that there were multiple Pain bodies, and if they were all present, the Toad Genjutsu would have ensnared all of them, or Jiraiya would have eventually located the real Pain body that is Nagato and taken him out. Both interpretations work, and both really mean that Jiraiya still isn't above Pain, or if he were going to be above, it would have to be via Toad Genjutsu with all being present, which doesn't mean Jiraiya is stronger, more so that he has a technique that is stronger. At number 6, we have Six Tails Naruto and Sage Mode Naruto. Now, it might be kind of cheating to have Six Tails Naruto on here. I don't think it really matters. I kind of did Four Tails Naruto and regular Naruto, so I figured I might as well just throw Six Tails on there, since The QB is almost like its own character at this point, especially when Naruto goes into the higher stages of transformation. During this arc, Naruto achieves a massive power up in the form of Sage Mode. Naruto had traveled to Mount Miyaboku in order to master this power with the express purpose of surpassing Jiraiya. There's an underlying narrative in this arc, as in the previous arc it was Naruto surpassing Kakashi. Now in this arc, it's Naruto surpassing the likes of Jiraiya. This is also something Tsunade notes pretty explicitly, with Naruto's feats and training reflecting this idea during the arc. We see during this arc, Naruto is able to master Sage Mode at an even quicker rate than Jiraiya, who is one of the more noted users of Senjutsu. Fukasaku also thinks Naruto may have become a sage exceeding Jiraiya due to no frog features being present. This is something all but confirmed through Data Book 3, which notes, after intense training, Naruto mastered Sage Mode beyond even Jiraiya, his former mentor. Coupled with Fukasaku's statement when Naruto appears to fight Pain that Naruto surpassed his predecessors, is pretty object fact that Naruto is above Jiraiya at this point. Even if you want to say that Jiraiya isn't too far behind Naruto, which I do think is a very fair take, Naruto's arsenal just kind of outclasses Jiraiya. Instead of actually needing Ma and Pa to enter Sage Mode like Jiraiya, Naruto is able to enter it on his own and even have shadow clones collect nature energy for him. Although this does put a restriction on the number of shadow clones Naruto can make, but the fact that he can make 3 clones while also fighting is pretty ridiculous. Naruto's also able to use the Rasen Shuriken in this arc, which is not insignificant as this jutsu is pretty insane, as Naruto was someone who was on Kakashi's level without it, but factoring it in, his Sage Mode arsenal makes him a true force of nature. This is something that Pain himself was really on the lookout for during his fight with Naruto, and Naruto does perform very well versus Pain, which is something that Pain gives direct credit to. Now Naruto also did have a lot of support in this fight, having intel kind of spoon-fed to him during the fight, along with rolling up with Gamabunta, Gamahiro, and Mr. Gamaken, along with Ma and Pa, who aided him during the fight and summoned the clones from Mount Miyaboku. It's very clear that Naruto isn't stronger than Pain, as he had all these factors while Pain was still recovering, and the strongest path of Pain wasn't active, but still doing that well versus Pain is a feat of itself. And Naruto actually does defeat the Diva Path 1v1 after the Nine Tails emerges in this fight. Granted, it's a more fatigued Diva Path, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but I still do think these are all impressive showings, as most people would not be able to do anything to Pain, evidenced by him literally running the hands with an entire village. I have Six Tails Naruto above Sage Mode Naruto due to how it interacts with the Diva Path's ability Shinra Tensei, the ability to repel anything in creation. This repulsive force is so strong that ninjutsu and taijutsu are equally ineffective. With an unexpected discharge of this invisible force, it's very practical to catch the opponents with low guard. The reason is pretty simple. Six Tails Naruto was able to get around this ability, whereas Sage Mode Naruto couldn't. The minute the Diva Path actually returned to full strength, Sage Mode Naruto conceded his ninjutsu and taijutsu really weren't going to work on the Diva Path, whereas on instinct, Six Tails Naruto was able to get around this ability, forcing Pain to utilize a stronger ability in the form of Chibaku Tensei to actually get around this form of Naruto. We don't know the exact distance, and you can attribute some of this to just the Nine Tails and how its power works, like the Six Tails Naruto putting its tails in the ground to withstand the recoil from the Shinra Tensei, and then flinging that back on the Diva Path of Pain. So you can maybe say the gap isn't that massive between them, but I do think Six Tails just has a better showing this arc compared to Naruto himself. At number 5, we have Itachi Uchiha. This is mainly due to him just having these higher showings, even in such a weakened state, along with having shared diction with Pain at this point, that being both are invincible, albeit in their own ways, but they both do have the term invincible thrown on their names. Itachi is also regarded as an eyesore to Madara and the Akatsuki as a whole, and with him dead, he no longer needs to keep his pack to stay away from Konoha. So Itachi's strength or being was almost an embargo on the Akatsuki's movements on Konoha, which is pretty insane. This is also supported by some of the things we learn about the Master Man later on in this arc. At number 4, we have Pain. And Pain basically starts the Naruto version of Infinity War. I mean, this dude is just stamping all applications to the Pure Lands department. Pain essentially runs a 1v1 with the Lee Village, where the result was only one path of Pain actually being defeated or broken, as Pain likes to call it. Paths like the Naraka path were only incapacitated for a short period of time, although I will note that the paths of Pain do have a hierarchy in terms of strength. Pain is able to defeat notable shinobi such as Kakashi Hatsuki, only using a fraction of his true abilities. With only 2 of the 6 paths fighting Kakashi, Pain is shown tagging Kakashi instantly during their encounter with his black receiver, propelling away all his jutsu or taijutsu attempts such as a Raikiri to the face or Kakashi's lightning beast running technique. This is not a complete upper limit for Pain, as we see even later on against Seichiro Naruto, he can repel the Rasen Shuriken, but Pain's performance against Kakashi shouldn't be overstated with all the support Kakashi had in the form of Choza and Choji, along with the fact that he was chakra fatiguing himself to under half to even figure out Pain's abilities in the first place. As if this wasn't bad enough, the Asura Path, after being stun locked by a lightning doppelganger and crushed by Choza, was still able to intercept Kakashi from an aerial position and blatantly block his Raikiri during the 5-second cooldown that the Diva Path had. As if this were an impressive impressive enough, the Asura Path itself wasn't even bisected fully by Kakashi's Kamui, as the spine is still connected to the lower half of its body. And it may have actually been Pain's own Shinra Tensei that did most of the damage against Kakashi and the Asura Path itself, as Kakashi's Raikiri is shown hitting a distinctly different part of its body, that being the upper plate area. So you may actually be able to infer Kakashi's Raikiri didn't even do that much significant damage to the Asura Path, and it was mainly Pain's own jutsu that did a severe amount, which would also explain why the Asura Path is still functioning after all of this, which leads Kakashi to use Kamui one more time, giving him a VIP pass next to his pops in the afterlife. So while I do think Kakashi performs well, it's very clear that Pain was the dominant fighter here with Kakashi's extra support. Although Kakashi notes he did have a strategy in mind, considering the fact that 2 paths were still active while he was under half of his chakra supply, it's very unlikely he would have been able to defeat the Diva and Asura Path on his own, or create a situation to where he'd be able to restrain the Diva Path like he did in the original timeline. I obviously touched on the Diva Path of Pain, which is the strongest one and the one that is presented as the leader of the Akatsuki, or the main one that Nagato talks to us through. You have the Asura Path, which is displayed to have a mechanical-like body, creating additional limbs, firing missiles, which are able to damage and blow the arm off a Sage Mode user who, even off guard, should have a raised level of durability. So most people are probably going to get one shot by the Asura Path, or the missiles are going to be strong enough, I should say, to be able to kill most people. You have the Predator Path described as an endless whirlpool that sucks away every jutsu, and sucking away jutsu as if into a bottomless swamp, absorbing Naruto's Rasen Shuriken over and over with no real limit in sight, which is not inconsequential, as Naruto's Sage Mode chakra is a fusion or mock-up of his mental and spiritual energies. Although there is a certain balance that needs to be maintained, this is an overall greater chakra than Naruto's own base supplies, with 2 Rasen Shuriken running out Naruto's Sage Mode charge. So the Predator Path doing this is no small feat, which again, this is most people are probably familiar with Pain's abilities, so I don't want to stick on this, but you couple this with chaotic Shinra Tensei that could just one-shot an entire village, or the likes of Chibaku Tensei, which required 8 tails of the 9 tails to actually break out of. All of this just adding to Pain's narrative of being invincible, unbeatable, the whole 9 yards. Pain is someone who really never got to fight at 100%, as he's always either fighting for intel in the Leaf Village or in a state of recovery due to chakra exertion. An example of this is the Diva Path versus Sage Mode Naruto, where the Diva Path falls on its knees due to fatigue after running the most insane gauntlet known to man. So Pain's placement here shouldn't really be a surprise to anybody. Now, number 3, we have Minato. So this kind of coincides with the Madara placement at number 2, so I'm going to talk about Madara first. We don't get to see much from Madara at this arc, but his few showings and statements do actually paint him in a better light. To reveal that Madara is someone Kisame respects and trusts and has a deep history with, we discover that Madara, or the Masked Man, was the one who assaulted the Leaf Village 16 years ago. We also learn that half the 9 tails was sealed inside Naruto to master, based on Minato learning there was a mastermind behind the 9 tails attack, the Masked Man Madara Uchiha. Madara is noted to have saw through all of Minato's movements during their fight, noted to be no ordinary shinobi. Minato furthers this by noting he was a formidable shinobi and someone you need extraordinary strength to stand against and have any hope of defeating, which Minato is making this statement after having witnessed Naruto fight Pain. He knows about Pain, he knows about Jiraiya, and he knows about Naruto. So knowing about all of this, Minato still notes, yeah, you're going to need some extraordinary power to fight this guy. This being stated to current Naruto and factoring in his abilities does paint the yang half of Kurama, Masked Man, and Minato in a higher light compared to Pain and Sage Mode Naruto. Minato also piggybacks off of 6 to 8 tails Naruto showings that Pain was struggling with, which is why I prefer him over Pain, or have him over Pain, as Pain is struggling with the yang half of the 9 tails, that being 6 to 8 tails, not even being able to fully seal it, whereas Minato sealed and split up a full 9 tails. So again, we don't know the exact specifications of this encounter, but this is pretty cookie cutter stuff. I'm not gonna lie to you. Now, you may say, well, what about Fukusaku's statement about Naruto surpassing his predecessors? The way I interpret it is that this Minato statement almost supersedes that one, since we don't know the exact basis of what Fukusaku's saying. And Tsunade is the one who visualized Jiraiya and Minato, not Fukusaku. He just makes a general statement. If you wanted a maybe different interpretation, you can look at the Naruto Chronicler Guide, which seems to indicate that this is more so in reference to the Will of Fire, directly noting, carrying on his back the Will of Fire passed down in the village hidden in the leaves. Naruto, who has become a sage through his training, confronts Pain in a decisive battle. Which you could also add, okay, that means then he's also not stronger than Jiraiya, but the difference between Minato and Jiraiya in this case is that we have other statements kind of putting Naruto above Jiraiya and other narratives, whereas Minato is just kind of like, Kishimoto's so weird with Minato during Shippuden. It's like the carrot and the stick. Like, he's just constantly thrown in. But if you want my opinion, the most consistent interpretation is that the Minato Naruto point where he talks about the masked man and this higher power takes a bit of precedence over Fukasaku's general statement, at least if you're directly comparing and contrasting the two. I think Minato's is the more solid one, whereas Fukasaku's does have other interpretations. Or you would just say it's a general statement with Tsunade just visualizing Minato and Jiraiya. Doesn't really matter, but I do think the pain stuff is more consistent, especially off the Nine Tails stuff, because again, Naruto's kind of just piggybacking off the Nine Tails at this point, and this is half the Nine Tails we know. Number 1, we have Hashirama Wood Daddy Senju. I mean, you know, what do you really say about this? We don't get too much extra information about Hashirama. Obito makes a slight spoiler, Madara is Obito, but Madara makes a slight note. Hashirama just collected a few of the Bijou and kept them under his control, and then kind of handed them out like trading cards to the land to kind of maintain balance. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, not too much on Hashirama this arc. So Invasion of Konoha. Number 10, we have Killer Bee and Sasuke. Number 9, Tsunade. Number 8, Hanzo. Number 7, Seijimo Jiraiya and Hydro Orochimaru. At number 6, we have Six Tails Naruto and Seijimo Naruto. At number 5, we have Itachi. Number 4, we have Pain. Number 3, we have Minato. Number 2, we have Madara. Number 1, we have Hashirama. Next up, we have the 5 Kage Summit arc ranging from chapters 450 to 488. At the number 10 slot, we have Kisame, Hoshigaki, and Killer Bee. Now, I know people might say B might be kind of low. Just bear with me, right? Bear with me. Now, I do have Killer Bee in front of Kisame. This is kind of a weird fight because Kisame is just getting continuously amped off Killer Bee, yet can react pretty well to base to version 1B, with the higher levels such as version 2B being a little too fast and a little too strong for Kisame to just outright react to, dodge, or absorb all in one go. We know B is not going full A-Tails mode due to Ponta and Sabu being present, and he doesn't want to harm them or blow the area away, leading to a different kind of circumstance compared to Sasuke, where against Sasuke he was playing around, not really taking that fight too seriously, as in one fight he's gauging Kisame's reactions using Raidon enhanced ninja tools and using those objects as diversion so he can squeeze Kisame in and get a killing blow. So off of the version 2 feat, I do have a full 8-Tails Killer Bee over Kisame, but Kisame can combat the lower versions of Killer Bee, like the version 2 and above, especially once he fuses with Samehada, which pretty much allows him to dominate B, as he can casually absorb the version 2 cloak off, which was way too much for Samehada to have previously done all in one go. This, coupled with Kisame fighting in the water bubble while fused with Samehada, pretty much made it that he was able to overwhelm Killer Bee pretty handily. And I will say, base Kisame is a little tough to use because he obviously was growing stronger throughout the bout while B was weakening, and was kind of made specifically to fight Killer Bee. Like, that was his whole shtick. He was the best in the Akatsuki at Jinchuriki live capture, but at the same time, it is noted he's Jinchuriki level when he fuses with Samehada, along with having tail beast levels of chakra reserve, just being nicknamed the tailless tailed beast. Most people who power scale or talk about Naruto are really divisive on this fight. Some people think Kisame gets hard carried by Samehada and isn't the one reacting, or just isn't that impressive. I think Kisame is more impressive than that, or more impressive than Samehada, and all of the reaction feats are his. But at the same time, you can't really dismiss how B isn't going all out at the start of the fight. Similar situation to the Sasuke example, or Sasuke tiering that I had previously, where B's above, whereas Kisame and Sasuke arbitrarily just scaled below B to some extent. So I think this tiering is fine since Kisame can fight B and does have a good matchup, has long range water style and can fuse with Samehada to power himself up even further. Whereas Killer B is pretty self-explanatory, does very well against Kisame, can rip a hole in his chest, which Kisame heals off of the reserves that he had stolen from B, and B could have potentially gotten full 8-Tails, which would have given him a potential better matchup. So I think these two being tiered here or together is entirely fine. Next up, we have the 5 Kage and Tsunade. Now, I have some explaining to do, right? Because when I was scripting this out, I was really divisive on this part particularly, because I think, honestly, you could actually put some of the Kage lower, like Onoki and Mei, because I'm going to be honest, Onoki and Mei don't do anything in this arc, like, at all. And you can actually raise Killer B up because he has more statements and more feats to kind of put him on the same level as the Raikage, or in a similar tier. Although I do think the Raikage is stronger at this point in the series. Let me just explain. let's starting with the 5 Kage. We know off the chapter statement and, chapter synopsis statement that they are the strongest and most powerful ninja. We would probably infer that this is in reference most likely to the shinobi in their village or the shinobi they govern over. This is rather vague. One of the metrics I see some people use, or one of the better metrics to gauge the 5 Kage, is the second fan book. Now, the reason I'm bringing up the second fan book now is due to how it was dropped or takes place during the 5 Kage Summit era, which means it's more usable now. The statement in question brings up the relationship between the Gokage and the Sannin, who are noted to be equals or on par. Now, this is referencing the 5 Kage Summit Sannin, as is when the statement takes place, and there are really two interpretations of this statement. You either say, okay, the Gokage can now rival the Sannin as individuals, or the group, the Gokage, can rival the group Sannin, who can have kind of a teamwork boost when they work together. It's not really a teamwork boost, they just perform better as a squad because, obviously they fought together, so they would have more synergy than a clump of shinobi from other villages. This is being noted specifically in the data book. If you go off the interpretation that all of the Gokage are at that Sannin level now, or are at least comparable to a Sannin, this placement makes a lot more sense because a lot of the Kage don't really, none of the Kage actually have anti-feats in the 5 Kage Summit. The only one who may be questionable, and that's not really an anti-feat because that Sasuke is insanely strong. The Kage just kind of have really good lore stocks. So if you go under the interpretation that the Gokage are kind of more comparable to the Sannin now, this placement's fine, and you would stick Tsunade in this same ranking. I kind of have to go with one or another interpretation for this video, so I'm going to go with this one. I will say, though, if you didn't go with this interpretation, I would just drop Onoki and Mei due to lack of feats to number 10 with Kisame, and then raise Killer B right next to the Raikage and the other Kage in the summit. The problem with Killer B is, again, at this point, he's in a very weird stage where he's not that strong. And I know it sounds weird to say, but version 1 Raikage is on par with version 1 B's Lariat. People like Bei Sharingan Sasuke, Suigetsu, and Jugo can fight version 1 Raikage, so this isn't really that crazy of a feat, and version 2 Raikage is what's compared to those Bijou levels that Karen had previously experienced against the fight with B. Now, the databook statement noting that the Raikage is the strongest in the village actually doesn't really pertain to this time period and kind of shows a lot of images that are displayed later on, but you don't really need to use that. You can maybe look at the Road to Ninja guide that states the 5 Kage are the strongest shinobi from their village to also supplement the idea that the Raikage is above B, which I'm of the opinion that he is during this time period regardless. This also brings us back to previously established information like the Sannin being able to combat the likes of Hiruzen, who is greater than the 5 Kage, who can be argued to have gotten stronger. Maybe you could look at Gaara exhibiting better feats like catching Sasuke's end-tone wisps and intercepting B2 Raikage's guillotine drop compared to being a data arrival at the beginning of Shippuden. Or you could maybe look at the Raikage, who we see weight training, so maybe he's getting stronger via that as well. So there are valid interpretations, and I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh, this is absolute. I just kind of have to die on one hill or another for this part of the tier list. I'm going to be real, though. It doesn't really make that much of a difference for the later tiers, so I don't think it's too bad, but just understand, this is kind of a micro concession I have to have, and I either got to die on one hill or another, so I figured I'd at least address that other interpretation. I will also say, if you just wanted my opinion on the Kage ranking at this point, I don't actually have Danzo in the same rank as the other Kage. I'm going to be honest. I actually have him in the rank above. Spoilers. But I'd probably have the Raikage, Killer B, then Gaara, then the rank under, Kisame, Mei, and Onoki. And Tsunade is a bit more questionable on where she'd go because I believe she's kind of the weakest Sannin at this point, just due to lack of information and lack of feats. We just haven't seen too much from her. So you may be able to actually just put her below a couple of these people, especially if you go off the Sannin statement or the 5 Kage being comparable to the Sannin at this point anyway. If you still believe Hiruzen's stronger than everybody at the summit, then you could extend that to Tsunade and possibly put her above, or just put her where you think compared to the power of the full 8 tails and version 2 Raikage. Alright, so we kind of had that done. Now at number 8 we have Danzo / Hanzo. Why do they rhyme, bro? So I'll start with Hanzo. Again, I think being at the upper end of a Sannin to just being threatening to the point a Sannin needs to move up a tier is actually enough to suggest he'd be above most of the Kage at the summit, especially since the 5 Kage are questionably at that point, or if they are, it's a higher end for them. So I think Hanzo's placement is entirely fine. I don't think there's any really reason to change it. Again, it bounces off Jiraiya, who potentially bounce off Hiruzen. You guys understand, you guys can connect the dots. I don't need to sit here and just spell out the same scaling chain you've heard a number of times. At number 8, we have Danzo. Now, Danzo's actually very impressive during the summit. This obviously being due to Izanagi, which pretty much allows Danzo to rewrite what's happening on the battlefield, specifically in reference to himself and his debts, along with respawns that can't be tracked by noted sensor users such as Karin, who has sensory more notable than Dojutsu like the Sharingan, and the Mangekyo Sharingan, neither of which were able to sense Danzo's respawn. He has hard-hitting jutsu like the Vacuum Blast, which when paired with the Baku can tear apart the backside of the Susanoo, or at least find the chink in the armor, like be potent enough to actually affect the Susanoo externally. And this is a big deal. Like I think people underrate this feat, because even though it is amped, most times he'd probably be able to do this against anybody in the Kage Summit off of a respawn. The Raikage in a V1 form can only crack one piece of the ribcage via the Liger Bomb, and then when he powers up to V2 and stacks Body Flicker on top of that, he's shown destroying 2 of the ribs and actually breaching the Susanoo. You can see he breached it because Sasuke actually has a bruise on his, like, it's kind of like his upper neck / chest. He has like a bruise where the Raikage kind of chopped him. So it took Raikage powering up to his max to actually break through the ribcage, and then Danzo was able to affect a form 2 stages higher, one stage higher being the skeletal Susanoo, and then the next stage being the armored variant. Even though you can say A is maybe faster due to his nerve transmissions and reaction speeds being on par with Konoha's Yellow Flash, along with showing feats like dodging the Amaterasu, or Gar reacting to the guillotine drop with his sand, it doesn't really change the fact that it's very unlikely they would be able to survive and continue to combat someone of Sasuke's caliber for as long as they did, because, and we're going to talk about this in the Sasuke section, Sasuke that fights Danzo is a way stronger variant that was tangling with these other Kage, and the one that was going to like high diff with the Raikage. It's very unlikely that the other Kage would be able to do what Sasuke did and press Danzo like that, meaning at some point or another, they're not going to be in an omnidirectional defense, and Danzo does have good AP with his jutsu to wear them down. So Danzo really is kind of cracked at this point, kind of mooching off Izanagi, Hashirama cells, which are boosting his physicals. There's obviously Kodo and Matsukami as well, which if you apply that to Danzo holistically, which I am, it does mean that most people are kind of fueled to be convinced or can be persuaded to lower their guard to the extent Danzo can hurt them or deal with them, which could really apply to most people on this list. And this is a power ranking, so you could just say that this is an ability that could potentially affect everybody on this list, even if Danzo himself is weaker, which is true because he's getting slaughtered by Sasuke for 10 minutes badly. So Danzo's placement here should be pretty self-explanatory. At number 7, we have Sagemo, Jiraiya, and Hydra Orochimaru. I'm not going to lie, there is like no change. The same reasons I had previously. I think these two just stay here. I don't really have a reason to change them. At number 6, we have Mangekyo Sharingan Sasuke and Sagemo Naruto. Now, Sasuke gets upgraded in this arc. This is so crazy how Sasuke is only touching like this upper area now. Like, I just haven't seen like a way to get him higher throughout Shippuden. It's really weird. I don't know. Bro's got aura. Like, he makes me feel like he should be higher, but he's not. So during this summit, we see Sasuke power up greatly. His chakra throughout the summit's constantly getting colder and colder. This is noted by Karin with his chakra being thicker / colder than it was in his curse mark second stage, which is pretty blatant confirmation that this version of Sasuke, even at the beginning of Summit, with his base Sharingan, has eclipsed his heavy self. While you can argue this isn't an inherent chakra thing, since chakra have their own unique properties, Sasuke's chakra getting colder and colder is synonymous with strength increasing throughout the summit, so I think the intent here is pretty clear. A baby version or the freshest version of Sasuke from the 5 Kage Summit was noted to be weaker than Sagemo Naruto. I'm not gonna lie, I don't see a reason why anybody needs to bring up this statement. We all know Sasuke gets stronger throughout the summit. If you try to use this to say Sagemo Naruto is just outright stronger than Sasuke, that's a bad take. You can have that take, just don't use that scan. That's all I'm saying. A baby version of this Sasuke was going to tie out with the Raikage and was only really being blitzed by the Raikage when he was using Body Flicker, as in every other instance, such as when the Raikage actually leaves Body Flicker and goes for that elbow chop on Sasuke, the Ladder Bolt of Pain, or is doing the guillotine drop, Sasuke's eyes can track him. Sasuke's one stage up Susanoo was able to take the likes of Dauri, Gaara, Tamari, and Kankuro's combined attack with no external damage. Sasuke would go on to hone his skills a little bit more. He does lose to Mei and Onoki, but this isn't really an L since he had taken so much damage prior, which Mei kind of notes. So I don't think this is too much of an L. If you're going to say, oh, Sasuke would have died in the summit had he not been saved, I mean, yeah, but like, who's also soloing the 5 Kage at this point in time or can run this insane of a gauntlet? So you know, nothing too crazy there. Sasuke would go on to fight and defeat Danzo, who his Susanoo evolves against. Sasuke dons an armor around his Susanoo with a crossbow that can shoot arrows out. Now, the arrows are actually faster than Danzo's physical reactions. Not his mental, but his physical reaction, which is why he creates that tree, which causes his chakra to plummet. This would also be much faster in the previous stage of the Susanoo, which Danzo could somewhat dodge and evade, although again, Sasuke is greater than Danzo stat-wise, as he can even contend with him outside the Susanoo, with the avatar or skeletal avatar being faster than Sasuke himself. Obviously, Kodo was on recharge from the summit. You know, that's entirely fine. Sasuke would go on to fight the likes of Kakashi during the summit after this insane gauntlet. Granted, he is getting healed periodically by Karin, so you kind of have to, like, take some of this gauntlet stuff with a grain of salt because he is being healed, but his chakra isn't going back up. Sasuke fights Kakashi, who is potentially somewhat mental nerfed due to the idea of fighting his student, which is kind of related back to Hiruzen and what he went through and potentially being mentally debuffed fighting Orochimaru. This doesn't really matter since I think Sasuke holistically is above Kakashi anyway. He fires 2 Susanoo arrows, forcing Kakashi to do... He kind of makes Kakashi perform an out-of-character move and use Kamui, which he hasn't done versus anybody in Shippuden thus far. Sasuke's anger comes to a boiling point and his Susanoo evolves, which causes it to don that same armored form that Itachi has. I'm going to talk about this a little more in the Itachi section, but this is when Sasuke's eyes burn out and we see Naruto arrive. Naruto should be next to Sasuke. I think the two are interchangeable. It doesn't really matter whichever one you have in front here. I actually think there's a better case for Naruto. I'm going to talk about this in 1 second, but Naruto arrives after tracking Kakashi's chakra to the summit while in Sage mode, which would have in turn made him feel Sasuke's abilities or the abilities he was using and the speed of his techniques against Kakashi, as it's kind of weird to say Naruto wouldn't sense the much larger chakra next to Kakashi's, but just sense Kakashi's chakra. This coupled with the narrative that Naruto and Sasuke are evenly matched at this point. They're both top class shinobi, and that they'll both die one day if Sasuke were to invade Konoha. Also want to note, he's talking about Sasuke one day, like not right now. He just says, when you invade Konoha, I'll be the one to fight you. It's pretty blatant that the two are on a similar tier for this to be the case, as this is only really the case, or they enter the mindscape when they're evenly matched. I know some people argue that this is in reference to a blind, fatigued Sasuke, but I will say Naruto does have good feats in the summit that would indicate it's more so referencing their full powers. Like, people bring up the fact that Sasuke is blind and fatigued, but don't bring up the fact that Naruto is able to grab Sakura out of Sasuke's hand before Kakashi or Sasuke can really perceive it, or how Naruto can physically restrain a Kakashi with a shadow clone to go clash with Sasuke. And again, I do think Naruto and Sasuke are above Kakashi at this point. Like, Kakashi tries to swing on Sasuke from behind right after Naruto pulls up, and Sasuke can block it even from a disadvantageous position, while blinded without his Sharingan, gets flying and is able to recover. So I do think the both of them holistically are above Kakashi here, and the idea is in reference to their full powers. There's also no statement about Naruto needing the Nine Tails chakra at this point in the series, whereas Sasuke does note he wants Itachi's eyes, directly contradicting his own current or previous ideology that he didn't wish the scenario that Itachi's eyes wanted, and didn't want the eyes because of that, but now wants them to solely crush Naruto. Again, it doesn't really matter that, you know, whoever you have in front, just more so that these two kind of belong in the same tier. And Naruto's reasonings are exactly the same, coupled with directly bouncing off of Sasuke and other characters shown at this time period. Next up, we have Itachi, really just here for a lot of the same reasons. We get a bit more insight to the Susanoo and how Itachi had a level of mastery over the technique that Sasuke had only achieved by the peak of the summit, that being the armored variant, which allows Itachi to kind of piggyback off of all the feats Sasuke performs in the summit, along potentially better genjutsu that is kind of noted by Obito in the Danzo fight. This isn't really taking into account Sasuke Jin Raiden, which I'm not going to address since I'm not going to use novels for this video, but yeah, I figured I'd note that. At number 4, we have Pain. Pain is still here for a lot of the same reasons. Pain losing was something that did not factor into Obito's plans and was something he was not accounting for. Like, he didn't even think it was a possibility, which further cements the idea that he'd be this high and just this god-tier character at this point in the series. And obviously he bounces off Sage Mode Naruto and MS Sasuke further as well, as Pain is obviously stronger in that variant of Naruto. Pretty self-explanatory stuff on this front. At number 3, we have Minato. Now, I'm going to skip Minato for 1 second. I will say though, just to note this, the reason the Raikage is not up here or Minato gets dropped is having the same reaction time as a shinobi isn't just like the same thing as being as strong as that shinobi. Reaction time is one key part of what makes a Naruto character or a Naruto character's arsenal. Like, the Raikage is faster than Sasuke's reaction, but he still would have lost that fight or tied with Sasuke during their encounter. So the argument that his nerve transmission reaction speed are on par with Konoha's Yellow Flash, which means he should be as strong as him, is not the same, especially when we know Minato uses space-time ninjutsu, such as flying Raijin Jutsu, as shown in Kakashi Gaiden. So I don't think that's enough, but Minato's placement stays the same off of the previous statements being made, so nothing should really change on that front. At number 2, we have Madara. Now, the interesting thing about Madara is that he's described to be almost in an incomplete state during this arc, noting he has very little power, and his goal is to be in true form. It's kind of vague, but the data book actually follows suit with this, noting he's still recovering from his injuries with the first Hokage, meaning that Minato had fought during the Nine Tails attack or encountered a nerfed version of Madara and was on the losing end of that encounter via his own assessment of the engagement. So a full power Madara would still just be way higher at this point in the series. And then Madara and Hashirama being noted among the few to actually achieve complete control over Bijou in the summit. And Hashirama just keeps getting stock over Madara due to all the stuff surrounding Madara and Minato and how they relate to the rest of the characters on this list. And then we're also just getting like we're getting Kage level shinobi just powering up off of Hashirama's hair follicles, you know? It's kind of ridiculous at this point. But yeah, I think Hashirama and Madara don't really change. I don't think Minato changes too much. I think a lot of their stuff stays the same. So final tiering for part 2. At number 1, Hashirama. Number 2, we have Madara. Number 3, we have Minato. Number 4, we have Pain. Number 5, we have Itachi. Number 6, we have MS Sasuke and Sage Mode Naruto. Number 7, we have Sage Mode Jiraiya and Hydro Orochimaru. Number 8, we have Danzo and Hanzo. Number 9, we have the 5 Kage and Tsunade. And at number 10, we have Kisame and B. It obviously addressed the deal with 9 and 10 and all the things surrounding that, but yeah, man, that's the video. I think we're at 2 hours long. You know, it's been a ride. If anybody has reached this point in the video, oh my gosh, man, huge shout out to you. I know I'm literally like on your second monitor. I see you. I'm looking right at you, bro. Don't think I don't see you what's going on right now. But no, on all seriousness, if you made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to my yap session for so long. I mean, like, I was yapping, bro, but I'm rambling a little bit, but this is like a more ambitious project, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you guys want me to do more stuff like this, part 3, and just like maybe this for other series, you know, like the video, obviously, all that stuff. But yeah, hopefully you guys really enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Obviously, I couldn't touch on everything since I had to kind of abridge some stuff for the sake of my own sanity, your sanity, all that stuff. But yeah, man, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you next time, and bye-bye.